Chapter 1261. Commit. Chapter 1261. Commit _ Azure Dragon had to lower his head and admit his defeat. His heavenly monster tribe needed Shi Yin to survive. They couldn't live independently from Shi Yin, but Shi Yin wouldn't bear any loss if he left heavenly monster tribe. One side needed the other while the other didn't need them to survive. Of course, they had to yield. From now on, you guys aren't allowed to activate the energy gathering formation on the Heavenly Monster Mountain Range anymore. The Vault of Heaven Sea area is your territory. You can get into the dark magnetic noxious mist to cultivate, but it's not exclusive to Heavenly Monster Tribe. The others can go there to cultivate too. Heavenly Monster Tribe will not interfere with them. Shi Yin walked out of the space slit, hovering in the sky above the Heavenly Monster Mountain Range. He observed the members of the Heavenly Monster Tribe underneath and shouted. Heavenly Monster Tribe's clansmen looked begrudging and dispirited, but no one could retort. Song Yun of Heavenly Monster Tribe had transformed to his humanoid form, and he stood in the crowd of his fellows. He lifted his face to look at the sky, sighing and looking lonely. Holy Beast Azure Dragon looked upset. Pondering for seconds, he nodded. On behalf of Heavenly Monster Tribe, I agree with your arrangement. We will not forcefully draw the energy in the sea territories around anymore. I hope it won't have to be repeated, said Shi Yin, his face cold and harsh. If it's repeated, Heavenly Monster Tribe must leave this place immediately. Then, this place will become the prohibited land, and all of you will be banned. All the members of the Heavenly Monster Tribe shut their mouths. They wanted to retort, but they didn't have such power. In the coming 10,000 years, the earth and heaven energy in this area will reach the acme. As long as you can live here in harmony, your general competence will reach new heights as you were the race born on this planet. If you are content to your lot, I can ensure your prosperity. Shi Yin frowned and looked at the members of Heavenly Monster Tribe. He stopped at Song Yun. Song Ji, I don't aim at your Heavenly Monster Tribe. I just want you to be not selfish. Give the others a chance and the right to live. Heavenly Monster Tribe used to wander around the sea of stars. You guys have drained the energy of many life stars to survive. I hope you wouldn't consider this place one of the life stars you have drained. I don't want you to rob the others' welfare and exhaust the planet to strengthen your tribe. When they were on Desolate, Song Yun had helped him. Shi Yin recognized his favor. Thus, he told him those words. Song Yun forced a smile as Shi Yin was looking at him. He glanced at Azure Dragon, but talked nothing. Azure Dragon knew their situation. He sighed inwardly. As he had made up his mind, he didn't want to talk more. Each of the Heavenly Monster Warriors quieted down. Shi Yin didn't want to talk more, so he prepared to leave. Azure Dragon contemplated for a few seconds and then said, "The Blood Imperial Order has been activated. The descendants of the Bloodthirsty force on this continent have been taken away by the Blood Imperial Order. At this time, Shinhe and Frederick have asked Tsunami Chamber of Commerce to find you. They've been looking for you for a long time. If you want to inherit the Bloodthirsty force, you should use the Blood Imperial Order to leave." Shi Yin darkened his face. He released his soul consciousness, reaching every corner of the continent. Yang Tian Emperor's aura had disappeared. Leona's life magnetic field was gone. Also, Shi Yin couldn't find Fei Lan and Ka Tuo's commotions. It meant that Azure Dragon wasn't lying. He had the immortal realm and was staying in this continent, so he was able to sense those special energy fluctuations. Shi Yin wasn't surprised at his abilities. Blood Imperial Order? Shi Yin was bewildered. It's a special summoning method of the Bloodthirsty force. By using the mark on the warrior's glabella to draw the energy in the mysterious Holy Land, it will take the warrior directly to the Holy Land. When the Bloodthirsty force has a big operation, they will use the Blood Imperial Order. As they've activated it this time, it must relate to your enthroning event. Azure Dragon knew their situation. He pulled himself together as he knew that the Heavenly Monster Tribe's prosperity was dependent on Shi Yin. As long as Shi Yin was alive and was getting stronger, Grace Mainland could maintain its abundant energy that would benefit Heavenly Monster Tribe. If he died and his soul vanished, the connection between him and the origin would be cut off, which would lead to a dramatic change of grace mainland. Heavenly Monster Tribe couldn't have enough energy for 10,000 years. Thus, he couldn't betray Shi Yin, and he also had to try his best to make sure that Shi Yin could continue getting stronger. He had to ensure that Shi Yin was strong enough to not be afraid of anyone. Understanding this, Azure Dragon decided to tell Shi Yin the situation. You're the heir of Bloodthirsty. Even if you don't do anything, the God Clan won't spare your life. Moreover, you've got the Genesis fruit. The God Clan will definitely hunt you down to make sure that they wouldn't be defeated. His face became serious. Azure Dragon lowered his voice. As far as I've known, the God Clan's Elder Committee has summoned the 4 Great Heavenly King. It means that the God Lord has awakened. The 4 Great Heavenly King? The God Lord? Shi Yin was surprised. The God Lord is the patriarch that the 12 families of the God Clan recognized 10,000 years ago. He leads the Elder Committee. 10,000 years ago, he was the one who got the Genesis fruit. He has been the strongest warrior of the God Clan for dozens of thousands of years. He was the one that led the God Clan and the other experts to destroy your Bloodthirsty force that year. He and the other experts had besieged and killed Bloodthirsty. After that battle, Bloodthirsty's soul vanished and his body had exploded. Many pieces of his body had disappeared into the vast universe. The God Lord's soul was damaged badly. His body was gone. Afterward, there was no information about him. I guessed his situation was like mine. He was in a coma, and he slowly recovered. The 4 Great Heavenly Kings are the 4 strongest subordinates of the God Lord. They listen only to the God Lord. That year, they were as strong as the Cortege of 8. After the God Lord's soul got damaged and his body was buried, the 4 Great Heavenly Kings continued to destroy the Bloodthirsty force. As the Bloodthirsty force's remaining experts went hidden, no one had heard about the 4 Great Heavenly Kings. The 4 Great Heavenly Kings aren't under the Elder Committee. Rumors say that they have been drifting around the universe to cultivate aesthetically in remote areas, waiting for their master to wake up. Only their master could summon them. Today, as the Elder Committee has summoned the 4 Great Heavenly Kings, the God Lord must have awakened. Azure Dragon had told Shi Yin the God Clan's information. After that, he sounded more serious as he suggested. No matter where you're hiding, the God Clan will hunt you down because you're the successor of Bloodthirsty. You can't hide. You can only fight them back. However, with your personal power and current realm, you have no ability to fight against the God Clan. Thus, you have to use the power of the Bloodthirsty force. You have to control this force and become stronger quickly. That's how you can be strong enough to battle the God Clan. As the God Lord has just awakened, he needs time to recover. You should seize the chance and take over the Bloodthirsty force. That's how you can have the opportunity and the upper hand. Although Azure Dragon felt irritated, he had to tell Shi Yin the details and analyze the situation to give him more good opinions. It was all for the future of the Heavenly Monster Tribe. If you want to get rid of this fate and hold your fate in your hands, and if you don't want the Bloodthirsty force to control your life, you must become the master of the Cortege of 8. Then, you can plan the others' lives too. Azure Dragon knew that Shi Yin wasn't content to let the others scheme his life. That's why he had hidden in the space crack. Thus, he gave Shi Yin an explanation now. Shi Yin was baffled. He frowned and sank in his thought. Azure Dragon didn't disturb him. He asked Heavenly Monster Tribe's clansmen to keep silent and wait for Shi Yin's decision. After a while, Shi Yin took a deep breath and asked, "How can I go to the Bloodthirsty Force's Holy Land?" Azure Dragon exhaled in relief, a light sparkling in his eyes. "As you're the Bloodthirsty's heir, it's easy when you want to go to Holy Land of the Bloodthirsty Force." Pausing for a while, he continued, "By the way, Hollow Fearsome Star Area and Prosaic Star Area aren't in danger anymore. Since the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple have declared their reinforcements, the God Clan has retreated. Before these 3 forces have given their official decisions, the God Clan aren't going to offend them. The Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple represent the other forces besides the 4 great creatures in the vast universe. Although they aren't united, they aren't ordinary. The God Clan is going to try their best to have them on their side. Because of those forces, the God Clan had won the battle at that year. If you can enthrone, you need to persuade these forces too. Even though you can't have them on your side, you should make them neutral. If they go with the God Clan, this battle will still be a struggle as it used to be in the past. Listening to him, Shi Yan's face became solemn. Don't you worry. In the past 10,000 years, the God Clan has become too haughty. That year, when they invited those forces to help them in the war, they had promised many good benefits. However, after that, when the Bloodthirsty force was destroyed, the God Clan hasn't fulfilled their commitment yet. The alliance between them had shattered for a long time. In the past 10,000 years, they've been fighting a lot. It's not easy for the God Clan to have their support one more time. If they make a comparison, they will incline to the Bloodthirsty force more. Although the Bloodthirsty force is always arrogant and stubborn, and you don't really favor any force in this universe, you guys have a better reputation. You merely make promises, but when you promise something, you will fulfill it. Thus, if you can enthrone, you will have more chances to gain favor from those forces. Azure Dragon had wasted too much saliva telling Shi Yan everything he could to ensure the future of his tribe. Eventually, he expressed his opinion. From the time you've got the Genesis fruit, our heavenly monster tribe has proactively walked the same path with you. I'm sure that our heavenly monster tribe will stay on your side in this war. We don't have another choice. The members of Heavenly Monster Tribe wore a bitter visage as they sighed. Although Shi Yan had just aimed at them and they had to embrace a lot of dissatisfaction, they still needed to go with Shi Yan and help him resist the God Clan with all of their will and power during this critical time. Just like what Azure Dragon had said, they didn't have any other option. Earlier, when Shi Yan had fused with the origin of their ancestral star, they had to stand on the same side as Shi Yan. It was their fortune and also their misfortune. It depended on how they viewed the situation and took action. If your heavenly monster tribe tries your best to help me, I will give you even the Black Water Sea territory after this war. It's the payment for your efforts. Shi Yan looked at the members of Heavenly Monster Tribe and spoke with a serious visage. Azure Dragon's eyes brightened as he eyed him. Thank you. Chapter 1262, Step into the Blood Sea. Chapter 1262, Step into the Blood Sea, _ Deep inside the immense, endless sea, Shi Yan was on a reef, looking to the area far ahead while stroking the blood vein ring. He asked, how will we go to the Bloodthirsty Force's holy land? How am I going to enthrone? Leaving the heavenly monster mountain range, he pondered for a long time. Eventually, he decided not to ignore it anymore. He was going to listen to Azure Dragon. If he didn't want fate to bind him, he had to hold it in his hand. If he became the master of the Cortege of Eight, the future leader of the Bloodthirsty Force, he could even control the other's destiny. He would gain control. He made up his mind and decided to be proactive. He had to fight for his future. He was going to take the glorious throne of the Bloodthirsty Force's master, the sole leader of the Cortege of Eight, and kick the God Clan out of the arena. The blood vein ring sent him some vibes and glowed. Once the Blood Imperial Order is activated, anyone with the blood mark can use it to enter the Holy Land. As the Blood Imperial Order has in the Holy Land and is activated now, you can trigger your soul to activate the energy to cross spaces to get to the Holy Land directly. How do I activate it? It's simple. You just need to think about it and send your soul consciousness into the mark. That way, you can feel the call of the Blood Imperial Order. Let me try. Shi Yan prepared to try. Hold on. Once the mark opens, you will be summoned directly to the Blood Sea Holy Land. The ring's spirit stopped him. I need to tell you how to enthrone first. Shi Yan became focused and lowered his voice. Please, do tell. You know that my memory was divided into 3 parts kept by Lao Luo, Xian He, and Xian Shan. They were responsible for finding the successor. Lao Luo came to Grace Mainland, Xian Shan came to the ancestral land of God Clan, and Xian He came to ancient demon continent. Lao Luo succeeded. He brought your soul here from the other universe. What does it matter to that enthroning thing? It matters. The so-called enthroning was set up by the Cortege of Eight, because when Master was still alive, he thought that he would never die utterly. He had never wanted to choose an heir. After he died, the cortege of 8 was like a snake without a head. At that time, they came to recognize that they should find a master. Because Lao Luo, Xian He, and Xian Shan kept a part of my memory for each, they were eligible to choose our master's successor. Since I was cooperating with them, with the power of the ancient continent's origin, we could change the natural principle to impart the devouring power Upanishad to the successor instantly, said the ring's spirit. Shi Yin nodded quietly. That year, Lao Luo had brought a part of the blood vein ring's memory to Grace Mainland. He had twisted the rules of earth and heaven to take Shi Yan's soul from a different universe to occupy the body of another Shi Yin. Then, Shi Yin had received the inheritance from that blood pond. Unfortunately, the brave and stern Xian Shan had come to ancient God continent, the ancestral star of the God clan, to scheme things that were against the nature order. Eventually, the God clan's experts had joined hands to kill him. Xian He came to ancient demon continent. However, the origin of that planet was almost drained. It didn't have enough energy to guide a soul from another universe. Xian He had to give it up begrudgingly. He kept the part of the blood vein ring's memory and left his streaks in the vast sea of stars. Then, he waited patiently. He hoped that the other two could succeed. Then, the ring's spirit could gather its full memory once again. The 8 chiefs had determined that if Lao Luo, Xian He, and Xian Shan could find the successors, they would let the 3 fight each other. That's how they could fuse the part of memory and choose the strongest. This warrior would be qualified to enthrone and become the new master of the bloodthirsty force. The ring's spirit continued. Xian He and Xian Shan failed. Now we have only me. What should we do? Shi Yin rubbed the bridge of his nose. The 8 chiefs wanted the leader to be someone with a bloodthirsty heart. The one who defeated the other 2 would be able to lead them all. If they had 3 successors, they would let them fight. The one who stands to the last moment would enthrone directly. Of course, they had thought about the current situation where 2 of them failed and only one had received the inheritance. When this happens, this person has to receive the acceptance from the 8 chiefs. That warrior had to get the approval from at least 5 out of 8 chiefs and make them believe that he has the will, characteristics, wisdom, realms, and qualities that would make him qualified to order the chiefs. It means that if I want to get that position, I must gain the approval from 5 out of 8 chiefs. Right? But we know that only Ming Hao, Xian He, and Frederick are alive among the 8 chiefs. What should we do then? The strongest warrior of each force of the 8 great inheritances will become the new chief. As the Blood Imperial Order is activated, they must prepare to select the new chief of each force. Any warrior of the force that doesn't have chief can compete to be the strongest one cultivating that power and be the next chief. I understand. Listening to the ring's spirit, Shi Yin now understood the rules of the bloodthirsty force. If he wanted to enthrone, he had to get the approval from 5 chiefs. Because of Xian He's and Xian Shan's failure, he couldn't fight the other 2 candidates to get the throne himself, so now he had to count on the others' recognition. As Xian He and Frederick had been arranging a lot of things for him, they had to be on his side. Thus, he had 2 chiefs on his side now. He needed 3 more to become the new master of the bloodthirsty force. However, Shi Yin knew that it wasn't simple. Ming Hao of the Soul Control Force was the leader of the cortege of 8, and he didn't think the same way with Shi Yin. This man had countless faces with the ultimately powerful force in the bloodthirsty force. The shadow of this man existed in the dominating forces in the sea of stars. It wasn't going to be easy to get over this man and enthrone. At first, you should go to the Blood Sea Holy Land. I'm sure that Xian He and Frederick will arrange something, said the ring spirit. Shi Yin nodded. The wind blowing from the sea felt warm. Shi Yin took a deep breath of humid spirit qi in his lungs to calm down. He sat neatly on the reef. His soul consciousness gathered and his mind concentrated at one spot, which was the mark on the host soul's glabella. The blood mark became clear. He gathered his soul consciousness and felt the energy fluctuate from the blood mark. His mind flickered as he found a calling energy that came from the unknown place through the endless space. It was like a mother calling her children home. The voice ran directly into his soul and made him baffled. At that split of time, The god power in his body ran like an electrical current that flooded his head. The blood mark appeared between his eyebrows on his real body, glowing in a strange blood halo. As soon as the halo emitted, a blood vortex appeared from the sky above his head. It had a powerful suction force that was trying to pull him away. As Yin cultivated space power Upanishad, at first glance, he knew that vortex had the supernatural power of space that even at first sky of incipient god realm, he couldn't recognize its mysteries and how it was operated. That vortex was like a black hole in his brain. They were both ultimately mysterious that he couldn't describe. Yin didn't wiggle. He turned into a blood light and got into the blood vortex. After he had disappeared, the vortex shrank like a balloon that had the air inside drawn out. Shortly after, it had become a blood light dot and it vanished into thin air. The vast blood sea. Frederick was using his power Upanishad on the island with thick corpse chi. He opened his mouth and released a pale cloud flying away. Shortly after, Benny on the Destruction Island, Benton and Fei Lon on the Corrosion Island, Leona with her father Thor on the Dark Island, Ka Tua on the Chaos Island, and Yang Tian Emperor on the Despair Island were bewildered. Right after that, they saw pale clouds come to them and take them away. Benny, Ka Tua, and Yang Tian Emperor had low realms, so they couldn't resist. They had to follow the clouds. Fei Lon at incipient god realm changed her face. She was ready to counterattack. It's the corpse cloud of Sir Frederick. No need to panic. I think he wants to talk to us, said Benton. Fei Lon was surprised. Sir Frederick is the corpse chi chief. He and He saved me from the Dark Shadow clan that year. Sir He and Sir Frederick have done us great favors, continued Benton. Listening to him, Fei Lon stopped her moves. Just like that, Thor was explaining to Leona. That year, your big uncle and I came to Agate Star area from God Perishing Land in Raging Flame Star area. Because we used the Dark Power Upanishad and the Corrosion Power Upanishad, the Dark Shadow clan noticed us and confined us. They wanted to bring us to the God clan. Fortunately, Sir He and Sir Frederick found that. He had come to save us personally. Recently, we were cultivating in seclusion as they told us to do. Leona nodded. The corpse cloud brought Yang Tian Emperor, Benny, and Ka Tua to the Corpse Chi Island. As Frederick saw them, his soul flickered and sent a message to He. He was watching his subordinates cultivating happily in the blood shower on the Death Island. He grinned and disappeared from the island. Then, he appeared by Frederick looking at Yang Tian Emperor, Benny, Ka Tua, and the others. Who knows Yan's whereabouts? Yang Tian Emperor looked bewildered, frowning and shaking his head. Why do you need to see him? He gave a warm smile. He's the Bloodthirsty Force's successor. He'll be our future master. We need to find him to let him take the role of the master. He turned to Thor and Benton. Hey, the Blood Imperial Order has summoned all the experts cultivating Dark Power Upanishad and Corrosion Power Upanishad. Did you find anyone you can't deal with? I rescued you guys from the Dark Shadow clan with the hope that you two would become the chiefs of the Dark Force and the Corrosion Force. To nurture you, Frederick and I have spent a lot of original incipient grade pellets and materials. I'm sure you understand that we will not create any mistake in this. Thor and Benton were earnest, and they replied respectfully. We won't fail you, sir. Are you confident? He squinted. We'll win. Thor and Benton shouted. We have the death, corpse chi, dark, and corrosion. It shouldn't be a problem. Ming Hao's soul control force will listen to him. About the other three forces, destruction, despair, and chaos. I think 80% of the new chiefs will be on Ming Hao's side. It's a little troublesome here, Frederick frowned. He nodded and glanced at Benny, Ka Tua, and Yang Tian Emperor. After a while, he sighed inwardly. Benny, Ka Tua, and Yang Tian Emperor didn't have high realms. They weren't able to control the force or become the new chief to give Yin their votes. Chapter 1263, Frantic. Chapter 1263, Frantic _ Inside the dark abyss, a narrow blood light descended from the scarlet void like a saber thrusting into the blood sea. Its destination was the only sealed bone island here. At that moment, the 8 islands with the power of soul control, death, corrosion, dark, chaos, destruction, despair, and corpse chi shook grumblingly. Warriors from different races staying on those islands looked at the sky in fear. The bone island at the center was the secret place where Bloodthirsty used to cultivate. The others weren't allowed to get in. Even the 8 chiefs could visit the island only when Bloodthirsty allowed them to. The bone island with the devouring energy fluctuations was the center of the Blood Sea in the forbidden area of the Holy Land. It was the root of the Bloodthirsty force. Since Bloodthirsty had fallen and his body had fragmented, that small island had remained sealed. The 8 chiefs had tried many times, but none of them could open the place where Bloodthirsty used to cultivate. Until now, the descendants of the Bloodthirsty force thought that the island would never open again. This kind of thought seemed to be carved in their souls and made them think that it was true instinctively. However, today, a blood light had pierced through the forbidden land that had been sealed for 10,000 years. Each warrior of the 8 great inheritances knew the secret of the forbidden land. They discolored in fright as they knew that a new era was about to come. The black eyes of the Imperial Dark Man on the Soul Control Island shot out the cold air. He stood up and looked at the island in front of him. He said sinisterly, unexpectedly, "He comes. Harumph. Does he think that he can be the new master with the inheritance from the old master to rule our chiefs?" There were many warriors cultivating soul control power Upanishad. They were the members of the Dark Spirit Clan, the Dark Shadow Clan, and the Dark Clan. Those warriors were his henchmen. The warriors with the soul control power Upanishad were experienced experts with exquisite knowledge of the soul Upanishads. All of them had dark and sinister auras as if their bodies had bound countless ghosts and creatures. Their cold eyes were so piercing. They looked at the Imperial Dark Warrior and kept their mouths shut. No one replied. "Our chief has his plan. That one isn't qualified to be the new master." The man raked his eyes through the place and spoke in a cold voice. "You guys came to the other island and spread our chief's idea to them." Some experts at the incipient god realm nodded. Their bodies stayed on the Soul Control Island while their souls became a bunch of dim light that flew around. They disappeared shortly after. At the same time, Frederick and Xin He were asking Phelan and Leona to know Shi Yan's whereabouts. They wanted to know every place Shi Yan could visit as they needed to find him hurriedly. Every time they activated the Blood Imperial Order, it took a lot of efforts and materials of the Bloodthirsty force. Every time the Blood Imperial Order appeared, it meant that the Bloodthirsty force had a big event. They used the Blood Imperial Order this time to find Shi Yan, but they couldn't find him. Xin He and Frederick were so restless that they wanted to kill someone. "We don't know. We can't find our master. I've been in Fiery Rain Star area for a long time. I haven't met master. Didn't he go to Tsunami Star? He hasn't come back yet." "I don't know, either." Katua, Benny, Phelan, and Yang Tian Emperor shook their heads as they didn't have a clue. Xin He and Frederick were so annoyed. They had spent a lot of efforts to plan many things for so many years to carry out this Blood Imperial Order smoothly so Shi Yan could enthrone. At this critical moment, Shi Yan didn't tell them a word before he disappeared into the space crack. It had completely stirred up their plan. They felt so annoyed. In their points of view, all that they had done was to continue the Bloodthirsty force's inheritance and help Shi Yan achieve his goals. They assumed that Shi Yan would follow them and their plan. With their support, he was going to take the leader position and consolidate the 8 forces of the Bloodthirsty force to resist the God Clan. Shi Yan betrayed them. They felt so indignant. All of a sudden, a blood light pierced through the cloud and fell on the Forbidden Island. Xin He and Frederick threw each other a look, their eyes brightening. They looked at the island of the Master in the center and were filled with thrill. They grinned, taking Yang Tian Emperor's group and dashing towards the devouring island. Shi Yan was moving like a blood rainbow. He thrust into the small island in the center of the Blood Sea and landed on a pile of bones. The small island was made of white bones. Looking around, the island had only bones. There was no grass, tree, bird, or insect. It didn't even have earth and heaven energy. This place was so strange. The blood mist hovered and filled the small island like a blood cage, sealing the small island. While he was still landing, the blood vein ring shot out of a bright blood light and it tore that blood light cage. That was how Shi Yin could get into the island. Shi Yin gathered himself together and released the soul consciousness to sense. His face became stern. He was at first sky of incipient god realm, but his power was much purer and more condensed than the others. Although his energy was enhanced with space power Upanishad, he couldn't tear the bloody cage. It meant that the barrier covering the small island was very tough and tenacious. Perhaps only the peerless experts at Immortal Realm had the power to break this barrier, Shi Yin thought instinctively. Unfortunately, he didn't know that after Bloodthirsty had fallen, the 8 chiefs had tried many times and efforts to get into the island, but they hadn't succeeded once. The island where he was standing today hadn't welcomed anyone in the past 10,000 years. At this moment, Xin He and Frederick were also stopped outside the bloodlight cage. They were so excited when they came as they thought that they could enter the island one more time, but the barrier had stopped them outside. They released their soul consciousness and tried to contact Shi Yin. At their realm, their soul consciousness couldn't pierce through the barrier. Bloodthirsty had set up this barrier a long time ago. It was like an eternal boundary that separated the earth and heaven. It could stop anything, whether it was energy or the soul consciousness. Xin He and Frederick were at Immortal Realm, but they were stopped outside. They stood helplessly outside and glared at Shi Yan's bloodlight, entering the Bloodthirsty's forbidden land. Air. Xin He looked at Frederick. Hovering by him were blood clouds carrying Yang Tian Emperor, Leona, and the others. We can't get in there or contact that kid. What should we do? Even when we kept the piece of the blood vein ring's memory, we couldn't enter. It means that only the ring's spirit with full memory can get through that blood barrier. The blood vein ring is the key to opening the forbidden land. As he had the ring, he could get in there as he pleased. Frederick sounded begrudging. We couldn't get there before, and we can't do that now. We have no choice. We can only wait for him to come out then. But the other forces have to carry out the competition to find new chiefs. Why doesn't he get a good sense? Does he have some other thought? Sigh, I have a headache. We can't treat this kid as a normal kid. Xin He forced a smile. Leave it to me. I'm going to talk to him into this. He'll agree to get the throne. All of a sudden Yang Tian Emperor said, if he comes here, he must know the situation. He came here for the master position. You guys don't need to worry anymore. Hearing him, Xin He and Frederick couldn't help but look at Yang Tian Emperor. Their eyes were strange and piercing as if they wanted to see through Yang Tian Emperor's bones. After a while, a strange light shot out from Xin He's and Frederick's eyes. They nodded and agreed with Yang Tian Emperor. Yang Tian Emperor's realm wasn't really high. Typically, he couldn't be seen in Xin He's and Frederick's eyes. Anyway, Xin He and Frederick understood that they couldn't compare the real competence of the warriors who cultivated despair power Upanishad by their realm. They could feel some sharp power that could even pierce through the world from Yang Tian Emperor. This kind of spear had endless power. And only the experts at their realm could be able to see the nature of a warrior's competence that way. We should arrange this chief competition first and wait for him to get out of there. Frederick nodded. Pondering for seconds, he turned to Yang Tian Emperor. There are dozens of warriors cultivating despair power Upanishad on the Despair Island. In the vast sea of stars, only they can get the chance to encounter and learn the power from our master's soul consciousness and succeed to practice the power. One of them will become the new chief of the despair force. Do you want to give it a try? Xin He was shocked. He looked at Yang Tian Emperor as he was thrilled. After many years of arrangement, Benton and Thor were their weapons to get the chief positions of the Dark and Corrosion forces. However, even if Benton and Thor could succeed, they had only half of the 8 great inheritances even with the addition of Xin He's and Frederick's forces. They needed the support from one more chief to fulfill their plan. Yang Tian Emperor had shown them hope. Among the 8 great inheritances, the Despair Power Upanishad was the most special. No warrior could impart this power to the next generation. They had to learn the power themselves. Thus, The experts cultivating this power on the respective island didn't have profound realms. The strongest warrior in that group was at first sky of incipient god realm. Although Yang Tian Emperor was at first sky of ethereal god realm, the understanding of the power was more important than the realm. The warriors who cultivated this power could always fight higher realm opponents. In fact, right at the beginning, this power had been related to skipping realms and challenging stronger experts. Many peerless experts of this power had continuously challenged the opponents at higher realms to improve their powers. It sounded like a dreamy story when an ethereal god realm expert fought against an incipient god realm expert in the other forces. However, it could work in the despair force. Defeat that incipient god realm expert to become the chief of the despair force? Yang Tian Emperor eyes became frantically excited. They had a light that only extremely stubborn and wild warriors could have. His slender body quivered. A robust fighting will shot out from deep in his soul altar. Xin He and Frederick had their eyes brightened. They had only seen this kind of extreme enthusiasm in fighting on one-person Senro, the former despair chief. The sharp aura that Yang Tian Emperor was showing together with his frantic desire was more than what Senro had that year. A person like him was born for the despair power Upanishad. Although he couldn't take the chief position this time, he was going to become the soul or the core expert of the despair power Upanishad. Xin He and Frederick observed Yang Tian Emperor and thought such things. They suddenly had respect for him. At this moment, they seemed to see Yang Tian Emperor as the future chief of the despair force. His aura was even stronger than Senro's. When they looked at Yang Tian Emperor, they vaguely treated him as their peer. This was a sort of recognition. Heroes confirmed heroes. Chapter 1264. The Bloodthirsty Statue. Chapter 1264. The Bloodthirsty Statue. Forbidden Island. Shi Yin stroked the blood vein ring and walked deep into the island while frowning. This island had many dark red clouds with energy that could affect the soul. It aroused Shi Yan's bloodthirsty desire. He tried to put aside the chaotic thoughts in his mind to keep his head sound. His body flashed as he walked directly to the White Bone Island. Shi Yin was dumbstruck, and he stood with a baffled face. The center of this bone island had 8 grand earth and haven sacrificial altars. These 8 altars were several thousand meters tall and more than 100 mu large. They were made of some strange material. It wasn't metal or chalcedony, but it looked as red as blood. The 8 altars had a terrifying pressure that would have slapped people in the face. The 8 sacrificial altars were arranged in 8 directions, and they jutted into the dark clouds. These altars looked like soul altars, but they didn't have a sea of consciousness, a tier of power Upanishad, or an ethereal extent or incipient extent. These altars were made of a special material with many beautiful, exquisite carvings. Those patterns on the altar looked like what was carved on the blood vein ring. They were like profound records of earth and heaven powers. Each sacrificial altar had 5 blood clouds that hovered where it released the energy that matched with the aura of each altar. The 8 altars matched with 8 power Upanishads: soul control, death, corrosion, dark, chaos, destruction, despair, and corpse chi. The 5 blood clouds above the altars were the crest of the bloodthirsty force. Shi Yin didn't know which magical effects it had. It had been 10,000 years since someone could enter this area, but the 8 massive sacrificial altars didn't have a speck of dust. They were sparkling as if they were the source of power Upanishad inheritance. As long as he could sit on the altar, he could receive the respective power Upanishad. Only the despair altar looked different. It had a unique energy fluctuation as if it had reached the other end of the world that was seeking for a suitable candidate. It wasn't going to stay passively to wait for the warriors to get here and receive the inheritance. These altars had distinctive auras that were auras of the 8 small islands that he saw when he had arrived. The 8 altars were the foundation of the 8 islands. They seemed to be able to affect those islands' energy and direction. Shi Yin thought that they were so marvelous. However, what had surprised Shi Yin a lot wasn't these 8 grand altars. Standing in the center of the 8 altars was a massively imposing Demogorgon statue. That statue was even more majestic than the 8 altars. It looked like a holy mountain. The members of the giant tribe were like ants compared to this statue. That Demogorgon statue was extremely gigantic. It was made of the same material as those altars. A beam of light from the scarlet sky was shining on it. It gave people a fearsome feeling. That statue didn't have clear facial features. It had 2 horns on its head, a spiky tail growing from the bottom, and a pair of massive wings on its back. The Demogorgon had an exquisite set of keratin armor lingering on its body. From a distance, this Demogorgon statue was so intimidating. It faced the sky as if it was roaring and shouting at the heaven. The Demogorgon statue was more than 10,000 meters tall. It had long chains tied around its tail, shoulders, wings, and legs that were connected to the 8 altars. At first glance, Yin was shocked, but he actually had a magical feeling. That year, when he had come to God Perishing Land, he used to see the magical formation that the God Clan had set up in God Perishing Land. It used the soul-sucking demonic flowers to draw the energy, blood, and flesh from other warriors to heal the wounded experts of the God Clan. It was going to revive them eventually. That magical formation in God Perishing Land was similar to what was in front of him now. Each stone stele in that area had 12 chains that were used to collect energy from the victims. Taking a closer look, he found that the scale and level of this area were much more profound than the God Clan's God Perishing Land. Yin vaguely felt that the strange structure of the God Clan's God Perishing Land was a poor copy of this place. It could imitate the shape, but not its real essence. It was because Yin could feel that the 8 altars here weren't to bind the Demogorgon statue or to take energy from it. Quite the contrary, he felt that these 8 altars were some sort of weapons for the statue. It was like if the statue could use its force, it could swing the several thousand-meter altars around and use the abilities of the 8 power Upanishads to attack. It would be the utmost power of the world. The 8 chains that connected the statue to the altars seemed to be used to transfer the marvelous power from the statue to the altars to trigger their power. In his eyes, the Demogorgon was the master with the real power, and the 8 altars were just the weapons it would use to vent its power. Observing the Demogorgon statue for a while, Yin suddenly shouted, "Bloodthirsty Forces Master." He suddenly understood it. He remembered that when he tried to explore the mysteries of the blood mark many years ago, he used to see a fantasy like this. In an immense world, a giant was roaring inaudibly. Although he was chained by massive chains, he was still bellowing bravely. Today, as he saw this scene, he suddenly understood. "That's the statue of Master," said the ring spirit. Then, a finger and a bone of Bloodthirsty flew out from the ring and entered the gigantic Demogorgon statue. At that split of time, the majestic Demogorgon statue seemed to revive and send out earth-shaking energy. This kind of energy could crush a whole level 7 life star. It shook the soul and made people scared. While the Demogorgon statue had earth-shaking energy, the entire blood sea in this dark abyss bubbled and boiled up. The Demogorgon statue was still standing and facing the sky as if it was howling indignantly. However, it didn't have any special move. However, the chains connected to the statue's shoulders, wings, tail, and legs now had a strange blood halo. The blood drawings on the chains were like blood snakes that moved. "What's going on?" Yin looked stern. The imposing, intimidating aura coming from the Demogorgon statue made him feel like there were billions of mountains on his shoulders that made him kneel down. Under that aura, he turned into his immortal demon body and activated the power of his blood. However, he couldn't endure it. He slumped on the ground, soaking in his sweat. His bones made crack-crack sounds as if the prestige of the Demogorgon statue had broken his bones, soul, and body. That pressure was even more dangerous than the anger of heaven. Yin's mind and spirit couldn't endure it. "It's horrible." Yin was shaking. He called the blood vein ring as he wanted to know what was going on here. He could see that the blood lines on the 8 chains were moving towards the 8 altars. Strangely, the 8 altars began to move as if they were about to fly up. However, they moved several meters and then fell again as they didn't have more energy. The White Bone Island shook hard. The blood sea surged to the sky, and shook the entire dark abyss. Shi Yin spurted out blood. When the 8 altars fell back on the ground, they created a tremor that had almost displaced Shi Yin's internal organs. Shi Yin winced and gritted his teeth as blood trickled from his mouth. After the 8 altars fell back to the ground, the threatening aura from the Demogorgon statue disappeared. Then, he heard Bloodvein Ring's voice, "Only 2 pieces, still needs a lot." Shi Yan's face darkened. He thundered in his mind. "What happened? What do you want to do?" The Bloodvein Ring kept silent. After a while, it said, "From now on, you will collect my master's remains. Every time you get a piece, you can learn a power Upanishad from the cortege of 8. Among the 8 powers Upanishads including soul control, death, corrosion, dark, chaos, destruction, despair, and corpse chi, you've got only death power Upanishad. You can cultivate the other powers too. As long as you continue to collect master's remains, you can gain the powers Upanishads he used to have. What do you think?" Shi Yin was bewildered. Breaking through to the incipient God realm requires the perfect understanding of the powers Upanishad. If I get the other powers Upanishads at this time, it means I will never be able to break through again? He was a little confused. Devouring is Master's main power. With the other 8 power Upanishads, he was invincible. What you're worried about is an obstacle to the typical warrior, but it's not something you should worry about. The ring spirit paused for a while. You have Master's devouring power Upanishad. You can use it to swallow the new power Upanishads. I have the method to help you break through those powers. Also, you need to enthrone. Using the power of the bloodthirsty force to gather the Master's remains, you can learn the 8 new powers Upanishads. Then, you can officially inherit all powers from him. As long as I can swallow them, those power Upanishads will become mine. Shi Yin sounded dumbstruck. You can slowly inherit the 8 powers Upanishads including soul control, death, corrosion, dark, chaos, destruction, despair, and corpse chi. You just need to activate these 8 altars to trigger the source of power Upanishad inheritance inside, and then use the devouring power Upanishad to swallow them. You can have them, explained the ring spirit. Shi Yin was thrilled. When he fought against Haig, he had swallowed the metal star created by Haig's incipient extent, and it then appeared in his incipient extent, becoming a part of it. He had a vague feeling that the power of the devouring power Upanishad was absolutely beyond his imagination. Bloodthirsty could use the devouring power Upanishad to swagger tyrannically around the world. As he considered it his main power, this power Upanishad would be extremely evil. Today, he had finally confirmed his assumptions. The devouring power Upanishad was the utmost power in this universe, indeed. It was worthy of the first power Upanishad in this cosmos. The ring spirit had thrown the 2 pieces of Bloodthirsty's remains to the statue to activate some mysterious formation. However, as the energy in those pieces weren't enough, they couldn't trigger the real power of the altars. Apparently, the ring spirit wanted to activate the marvelous formation here as it wanted to gather Bloodthirsty's remains. The ring spirit didn't tell him what that formation would do, but it had given him an enticement he couldn't resist. Having the 8 great inheritances at the same time, he knew that the ring spirit wanted to get something secret through him. He didn't know what secret it was, but he couldn't endure the enticement of having the 8 powers Upanishads. For the remaining 7 powers Upanishads including soul control, corrosion, dark, chaos, destruction, despair, and corpse chi, he pondered for a while and then replied, "I agree with you. Then we must now get the leader throne first." The ring spirit was discreetly excited. Chapter 1265. There's an energy. Chapter 1265. There's an energy, _ The Forbidden Island had a great commotion that had even seethed the Blood Sea. It had startled all the descendants in this dark abyss. Shin He and Frederick were still lingering around. They could feel the tremor from the island deeply. They exchanged looks and saw the thrill in each other's eyes. They used to visit this island, so they knew that there were 8 altars in there that represented the 8 power Upanishads. In fact, those 8 altars could control the 8 island in the Blood Sea. The energy in those altars had many powers, including the ability to impart power Upanishad inheritance. They knew something about the sacrificial altars, but they didn't know anything about the bloodthirsty statue. Today, feeling the turbulent commotion from the island, Xianhe and Frederick were anxious. They were worried that something bad had happened in there. Yang Tian Emperor, Benton, and Thor had returned to the respective island of their force. Xianhe and Frederick had prepared for Yang Tian Emperor, Benton, and Thor to get the chief position of their force. That way, they could make sure Yin the new master. They hadn't left the outside of the center island because it wasn't time for the competition yet. At the same time, the Imperial Dark Old Man on the Soul Control Island had changed his countenance in fear. He observed the Forbidden Island from a distance. He pondered for seconds and then closed his eyes to contact Ming Hao. He told him the commotion of the Forbidden Island. He had stressed about the tremor and the boiling blood sea. He was so grave telling his discovery sufficiently. He then waited for the other's decision. After a while, he suddenly looked at a man from the Dark Clan. That man also cultivated the soul control power Upanishad, but his realm wasn't really high. He was only at ethereal god realm. He looked as thin as a dry tree branch with an average look. Under his gaze, that dark man was bewildered. Right after that, he looked like he was struggling with a wince. His soul was occupied instantly. Shortly after, his face resumed. But now he had a pair of dark eyes as if he had become a completely different person. Welcome the chief soul. The Imperial Dark Old Man immediately kneeled down, one hand touching his forehead and the other placed on his chest. It was the special etiquette of the bloodthirsty force to greet the leaders. The other warriors cultivating the soul control power Upanishad also felt a tremendous power pressing down. They hurried to kneel down, using the same etiquette to greet, screaming, "Welcome the chief soul." The soul control chief didn't plan to come here. Because of the strange commotion, he had to come here using his soul. He didn't have a body, but still, he could use his subordinate's body to appear in this blood sea holy land. Ming Hao's soul arrived. His dark eyes raked around the area like a ghost. On the Forbidden Island in the center, Xianhe and Frederick were gazing at the island when a blood light shot out from the inside abruptly. Xianhe and Frederick looked shocked. Then, Shi Yin flew out of the Forbidden Land and walked to Xianhe and Frederick. At the same time, a ghostly figure came from the sky and appeared right next to Xianhe. His cold eyes studied Shi Yin and then stopped at blood vein ring on his finger. His face changed again. It's true that our master's relic is the key to open the Forbidden Land. Xianhe and Frederick darkened their faces and looked at him. Ming Hao had countless appearances. His soul could come and possess any warriors who he had turned into his soul slaves. When he wanted it, he could use many beams of soul consciousness to appear as different people in different star areas at the same time. Those warriors could come from different clans and forces, but their souls would all be controlled. It was a supernatural power of the soul control power Upanishad. It was also the most dangerous and mysterious ability of the soul control force. Xianhe, Frederick, long time no see. You've been planning a lot of things for this man to get the throne? Ming Hao's voice was cold but tender. While talking, it seemed like he had sent his wisps of soul power to people's sea of consciousness discreetly. It was the way he used to control the other's mind. While Ming Hao was talking, Shi Yin felt a chill in his body as if an invisible force had invaded his soul altar. However, he enjoyed Ming Hao's voice a lot. Also, he wanted the man to talk more. Ming Hao had become a fantasy in his mind. Ming Hao, Xianhe shouted, his voice like the thunderclaps. The blood thunderbolts appeared in Shi Yan's sea of consciousness. As soon as those blood bolts appeared, the relaxing feeling and the fantasy in his sea of consciousness washed away. The blood lightning bolts with the intent domain of death and life continuously multiplied in his head, as if it could create death and life ultimately. The lightning bolts had smashed Ming Hao's invading soul power. Then, they had become the robust vitality that entered Shi Yan's sea of consciousness to clean it. Eventually, Shi Yan's sea of consciousness got cleaned with no dregs remaining. He's not qualified to be the next master. He couldn't even endure my voice, said Ming Hao. Xian He and Frederick didn't mind him. They all observed Shi Yin. Xian He smiled, showing his teeth and introducing himself. I'm the Death Chief, Xian He. He's Frederick. That sneaky guy that comes here with only his soul is Ming Hao, the Soul Control Chief. He's the biggest chicken among the 8 great inheritances. He's never fought with people directly. He always hides in the dark corner to play with his dark scheme. Xian He mocked Ming Hao, not trying to be polite. True. Well, they say that he's the leader of the Cortege of 8, but we never admit it. Basically, the one that has never shown his real body and has always enslaved the other's souls doesn't deserve to become our master's retinue. I still couldn't figure out how he could have a slot in the Cortege of 8. Frederick grinned and then laughed loudly. His mocking voice wasn't worse than Xian He's. Even when Bloodthirsty was still alive, Frederick and Xian He had never gotten along with Xian He. They had always fought. They never liked Ming Hao. When Bloodthirsty was still alive, he could subdue their dispute and unite them. However, after Bloodthirsty had fallen, no one could restrain them anymore. Thus, when they saw each other after many years, the 3 barked at each other's faces. It was normal if they fought too. I'm here today to get inside. Ming Hao looked at the bloodlight cage in front of them. Give me Master's blood vein ring. You're not qualified to keep it. Wait until one day you reach the immortal realm. Then, you can stand in front of me and keep the ring. Even if he has to hand back the blood vein ring, it's not for you, Ming Hao. Xian He laughed evilly. That year, Xin Shan, Lao Luo, and I kept a part of the ring spirit's memory. Even if we need someone to keep the ring, I should be that one. I don't care about your dispute. It was the first time Shi Yin talked. However, it was strange that Xian He, Frederick, and even Ming Hao didn't intervene. They just waited for him. Xian He, Frederick, and Ming Hao had known about Shi Yin from very early on. They knew that he had inherited their master's power and the blood vein ring. They had taken care of Shi Yin in silence. They even knew the details of every battle that Shi Yin had joined. However, they had never met Shi Yin personally or communicated to him. Today, it was the first time they met their master's successor. I'm here with the hope that I could gather his remains. His remains are scattered around the corner of the universe. Someone is keeping them too. As his heir, I'm responsible for gathering his remains. And you guys are his retinue. Don't you bear the same responsibility too? Shi Yin stooped to see the blood vein ring. He'd fallen for so many years, but his body wasn't intact. As his retinue, have you ever tried to do this? How do you know that we have never tried for this? Ming Hao's voice sounded so cold. So you think that we've done nothing after so many years? You hide here and crave for your life. What do you know? The God Clan has been searching for our master's remains. The Thousand Fantasy Sect, Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple have collected them. We always kept searching. Do you think only you want to do that? Xian He and Frederick exchanged looks and forced smiles. Our master's remains have been scattered at the end of the world. Also, they are very special. It's not easy to find them. You can see them or use the soul consciousness to sense. It just takes good encounters to find them. As far as we know, the Thousand Fantasy Sect, Broken Hall, and Heaven River Temple hold 1 or 2 pieces of him. Tsunami Chamber of Commerce and the God Clan have some too. They got them right after the fight before Master's remains had changed. Also, only Tsunami Chamber of Commerce has the piece that has turned into some unique material. Xian He shook his head, his eyes upset and reluctant. Tsunami Chamber of Commerce got it by chance. Someone sold it. They just know that they can touch it but can't see it or use the soul consciousness to check it. It's a rare thing and it exists. Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had mobilized hundreds of experts to check it. After they gave it to their president, they knew that it was a piece of our master's remains. The warrior who got it by chance had been dragged into the space crack and found it. He didn't know what it was, so he gave it to Tsunami Chamber of Commerce to verify, Frederick explained to Shi Yin. Why have his remains become so peculiar? Shi Yin frowned. Listening to Xian He and Frederick, Shi Yin vaguely understood. He had seen them, so he knew Bloodthirsty's remains could become invisible. It was really hard to find them in the universe as they couldn't see or sense it with their soul. Why are they so peculiar? Xian He, Frederick, and Ming Hao muttered, their eyes mysterious as if they had immersed themselves in the big secret again. Billions of warriors in this vast sea of stars have the same question. Many peerless existences, including the chief of the God Clan, the sect master of the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the master of the Broken Hall, the master of the Heaven River Temple, Frederick, Ming Hao, and me at the Immortal Realm want to know the reason. After our master had fallen, in the next 10,000 years, those experts want to know this mystery to control this kind of power. However, no one has ever succeeded until now. This kind of power that had turned our master's remains into something peculiar has remained a secret until now. No one could know or learn it, said Xian He. Shi Yin was astonished. He suddenly remembered what the ring's spirit had told him. Master kept a power that only he knew and controlled in this vast universe among billions of creatures. He'd fallen because of it too. What kind of energy was it? Chapter 1266, The Three Great Chiefs. Chapter 1266, The Three Great Chiefs Thousand Fantasy Sect, Fantasy Star. There were many bamboo houses inside a lush forest with beautiful sights and a network of rivers. The forest had abundant earth and heaven energy with a marvelous aroma. This sort of magical land with a great fragrance was really rare in this vast cosmos. This special place was also the private territory of the Thousand Fantasy Sect. Deep inside the forest were many beautiful waterfalls, hills, and palaces. The warriors from different races were walking here and there, taking in the earth and heaven energy to refine their bodies and soul powers. The Thousand Fantasy Sect was an ancient force that followed the rules of nature. There was almost no war chariot or battleship in Phantasy Star. The warriors here didn't count on external materials. They wanted to explore themselves as the foundation of their cultivation. Deep in the forest was a clear lake that had an islet. The islet was filled with green colors of lush florets. Many fish were swimming around the islet as if they could live in peace and harmony forever with no danger awaiting them. A handsome man was lying on his side in a small pavilion on the islet. He was holding a book and reading wholeheartedly. After a while, he frowned and lifted his head to check the sky, his eyes surprised. The magical lights sparkled above his head like meteors. His eyes became focused. He rose a hand to pull the void, and the sky seemed to be pulled all together. Deep inside the layers of clouds, some shadows flew through the barriers and landed on the islet. They were males and females at different realms. Surprisingly, they were Xing Ming of the Broken Hall, Gulian and Guling of the Thousand Fantasy Sect, and Lena and Cecilia of the Heaven River Temple. Besides them, there was another man and a woman. The man was sturdy with hair like a hedgehog. He looked stiff, and he wore a rough warrior costume. There was dust on his clothes. Apparently, he wasn't a man who minded his appearance much. However, Xing Ming of the Broken Hall was so respectful standing by him. This man was Caesar, the famous hall master of the Broken Hall. He was famous for his passion for martial arts. He had dedicated his whole life to martial arts. He didn't like women or wealth. He didn't mind minor things too. He had spent his whole life to learn and comprehend earth and heaven powers. Caesar was his father's successor. His father was the former hall master of the Broken Hall. Before he died, he had appointed Caesar as the new hall master. Although he had inherited the hall master position of the Broken Hall, he didn't care too much about the issues of the Broken Hall. The Broken Hall consisted of many smaller halls. He didn't mind their business unless the Broken Hall had encountered dangers. Only then did he step out and solve it. Although Caesar was lazy in taking care of the business of the Broken Hall, the leaders of the small halls under the Broken Hall had always respected him even more than his father. It was because Caesar was really strong, and his martial arts could protect the reputation of the Broken Hall. When the other entered the Immortal Realm, it was much shorter than the time his father took. He was much stronger than his father. He was the strongest expert of the Broken Hall, and he was still getting stronger. No one could be his rival. As long as he was intimidating, even though Caesar didn't care about the Broken Hall, the others still respected him. No one had the guts to provoke him. Besides Caesar, there was another woman. This woman looked graceful and mild. She looked very similar to Lena. She was tender and mature, indeed. She was Lena's blood sister, the master of the Heaven River Temple, Lorraine. Ling Xiang, you've been immersing in the beauty of nature for years. Has your realm increased further? Lorraine's clothes weren't precious or luxurious. They were simple and elegant, she said casually after they had arrived. Ling Xiang wore cyan clothes. He was the sect master of the Thousand Fantasy sect. Caesar, the master of the Broken Hall, wore simple, hempen clothes. Lorraine, the master of the Heaven River Temple, wore an elegant dress. It seemed like they had reached the stage where they had returned to the truth with the natural mindset. Ling Xiang smiled faintly and put down his book. Oh, it's not that easy. In the past few years, I've been cultivating ascetically at the end of the universe alone. I've sent my emotions to the mountain and the river to keep my soul sound and clear. I've been making a lot of efforts to maintain my realm and to not let it lower. It's really hard to develop further, though. The master of the Broken Hall, Caesar, nodded, his voice rough and manly. At our realm, it's no use to only cultivate and use pellets or spirit herbs. After many years, I've destroyed my soul altars many times to become a mortal person to experience the bitter and sour events in life. I can feel my realm change a little bit, but I haven't figured out how to break through again. Caesar sighed and looked at the immense starry sky, feeling a little dispirited. I don't know how he has cultivated. When Caesar mentioned everybody kept quiet as if they had a big mountain placed on their hearts. It felt so heavy they had to gasp for their breaths. That year, we hadn't reached the immortal realm. Our teachers and fathers had joined that battle. Most of them were killed. Many warriors had to bury their bodies there. I heard from my teacher that after that horrible fight, that man had shown that he was worthy of the title of the first warrior. Although his soul was destroyed and his body was shattered, he still exists today. Lorraine, the master of the Heaven River Temple, sighed deeply. All of them had stern visages and were frowning, sinking in their remote memories. They kept silent for a long time. That year, our fathers and teachers were lucky to get a piece of his remains. They imparted them to us until now. They hoped that we could use his remains to learn that unknown energy. It has been 10,000 years. Did you have any harvest? While Ling Xiang was talking, a box appeared in his hand that was made of the heavenly fragrant soul-soothing jade and was similar to the box that President of the Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had. Caesar and Lorraine wore complex countenances when they heard him. Their minds flickered and the same boxes appeared in their hands. Both of them were made of the heavenly fragrant soul-soothing jade. Lorraine sighed and looked at Lena standing by her. We've been trying every method we know to decode the mysteries of his remains to get that power. Unfortunately, we have failed every time. There were several times we were almost killed. She looked at Ling Xiang and Caesar. As you've been training for your whole life, have you ever encountered any good things? Have you ever sensed a bit of this mysterious energy? Caesar wore a heavy face, his brows slamming together as he shook his head. Nothing. Me neither, said Ling Xiang with a frown. Gulian, Xingming, and Lena just listened and didn't intervene with their conversation. Until now, Lena pondered for a while and then said eventually, that year, our teachers and fathers had collected his remains. For 1,000 years until today, the God Clan has solely ruled the world. And now, the Bloodthirsty force has the Genesis fruit. Their successor has shown up and defeated Hague. The sea of stars that has been quiet for 10,000 years is going to be stirred up again. We should have a choice. A choice. Ling Xiang turned around and looked at the horizon and then the lake with the fish swimming. Why do we have to choose? Why do the 4 great creatures who have the right to join the competition to conquer this world have to choose a side? Why we have to choose a side all the time? Do we have the right to join that competition and conquer this universe too? Hearing him, Caesar, Lorraine, Gulian, Xingming, and Lena were shaken. Ling Xiang turned around to look at them, his eyes as sharp as sabers. The 4 great creatures have taken turns to control the universe for the past 100,000 years, and we could only passively support one side. We have battled, but we couldn't enjoy the triumph. 10,000 years ago, our precursors of the Thousand Fantasy Sect, Broken Hall, and Heaven River Temple were killed. We had to bear a significant loss. But after the God Clan has won, what do we have? Caesar and Lorraine kept silent. We got nothing. We've sacrificed our blood and flesh to help the God Clan raise their dictatorship. We've created the dominating reign of the God Clan, but our position and status haven't changed a bit. We could only guard our star areas, and the God Clan didn't invade us. That's all that we've gained. Ling Xiang suddenly screamed. His calm aura changed, and it showed his sharpness. Caesar and the others were moved. They sank in their thoughts. This time, we, the Thousand Fantasy Sect, aren't just going to be supporters. It's a rare, once-in-a-blue-moon opportunity. Our ancestors had passed the opportunity, but I, Ling Xiang, won't let it go. He hissed. You want to compete for once? Caesar and Lorraine screamed. Ling Xiang smiled frankly. Didn't you come here with the same purpose? Don't you want to fight once? Currently, the Bloodthirsty force is weakened and the God Clan is domineering. Anyway, the Bloodthirsty force often creates miracles. If we do it well, we can have the chance to change the structure that has been established for dozens of thousands of years. The four great creatures are going to be the overlords of the entire world. I have only one question. What does that man from Tsunami Chamber of Commerce think about this? Lorraine asked all of a sudden. Same thoughts as mine, Ling Xiang smiled. Lorraine and Caesar exchanged looks and nodded. Excited light radiated from their eyes. Before that, to show our goodwill, Tsunami Chamber of Commerce gifted him a piece of his remains. We couldn't find anything from it for years, so we don't mind giving it away. It's to congratulate that kid as he can enthrone, said Ling Xiang. What if he can't enthrone? Lorraine and Caesar frowned. Then we'll choose Ming Hao. We don't care who becomes the master. We just want the Bloodthirsty force and the God Clan to fight each other until they both are hurt, laughed Ling Xiang. Lorraine nodded and turned around to look at Cecilia and Lena. You should watch this girl closely. Don't let her leave your side. I know, Lena nodded. Cecilia wore a sour face. After she had heard Ling Xiang's sharp shout, she understood that she wouldn't have a chance to meet Shi Yin for a long time. Her freedom was going to be restricted. The Thousand Fantasy Sect, Broken Hall, and Heaven River Temple had been playing the supporting roles for dozens of thousands of years with Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. This time, they didn't want to be the supporting roles anymore. They wanted to be the protagonist. They wanted to change the scenario and have the four great creatures to rule the universe again. They wanted to use their combined force to replace the four great creatures. This time, the Star War was going to be much more complicated. Chapter 1267, Empower. Chapter 1267, Empower _ The Blood Sea. Ming Hao, Xian He, Frederick, and Shi Yin were floating outside the Forbidden Island. They were quarreling about Bloodthirsty's remains. They couldn't conclude anything yet. The ring spirit can recognize his remains. The more pieces it gets, the better its sensibility can become, Shi Yin said, shaking his arm. I have 2 pieces now. Should we ask the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple to take them back? When you enthrone, we will do that. It shouldn't be a problem, said Xian He. Enthrone? Ming Hao's dark eyes were cold as he said, I don't agree. What does he have to enthrone? If 5 chiefs agree that he will become the master, he'll be the newly elected master. When Senro, Lao Luo, and Gru were still alive, we had confirmed this. You were there too. Do you plan to not follow that protocol? Frederick bellowed, his face ferocious. I will do what I've agreed to do, but we have only 3 chiefs now. We haven't selected the other chiefs. It's the gods will whether he can get the position or not. Ming Hao didn't want to talk to them more. His figure vanished like the smoke. Although he had left, his voice still came to their ears. We'll be in charge of the formation of our islands, and we'll prepare for the chief selection of the Destruction, Dark, Despair, Corrosion, and Chaos Islands. I'm on it. Frederick nodded to Shi Yin and then disappeared. Xian He smiled and explained, we need 5 chiefs to recognize you. That's how you can be the next master. Of course, Frederick and I will agree. Thor and Benton will compete for the chief positions of the Dark and Corrosion forces. They're at second sky of incipient God realm. It shouldn't be a big problem for them. Xianhe carefully explained to Shi Yin the protocol they had approved that year. He had also mentioned Yang Tian Emperor. If he can become the chief of the Despair Force, we're done. But there's a guy at incipient God realm in the group of Despair Power. He's not Frederick's or my warrior. We think he follows Ming Hao. Despair Power Upanishad. Shi Yan's eyes brightened. He grinned. Let's go to that island. I have a method to help my great-grandfather get the chief position. Xianhe was surprised as he gazed at Shi Yin and then nodded. Great. Two flows of light flashed and fell on the Despair Island. This island had dozens of warriors cultivating Despair Power Upanishad. Yang Tian Emperor was one of them. He was standing in a far corner of the island and watching someone far from him. His eyes sparkled with fighting desire. That person was a member of the Ghost Mark clan with cyan tattoos covering his entire body and face. He looked glum and sinister. With the first sky of incipient God realm cultivation base, he gave people a strange feeling of despair and loneliness with a feeble vitality. He was sitting in the corner while people could hear the white bones around him screeching and shrieking mournfully as if they were struggling in desperation. Yang Tian Emperor had considered him his target. He had aimed at that expert. The aura of an extreme warrior burst out from him as his immortal demon blood burned. Although he was at first sky of ethereal God realm, his body had the blood of the immortal demon clan. He used to absorb the blood essence crystal. The tenacious level of his body was extraordinary. Compared to that Ghost Mark warrior, if nothing unexpected happened, he could gain the upper hand with his body. However, because of the big gap between their realms, his overall competence was much weaker than Shi Yan's. Great-grandfather, Shi Yin called him quietly. Yang Tian Emperor was surprised. He lifted his head and couldn't help but scream. When did you arrive? I've just arrived, Shi Yin smiled. His soul consciousness covered the entire Despair Island. He recognized the realms of the warriors on this island. We're about to compete for the chief position. Anyone who doesn't want to join, please leave the island and go to Ming Hao's island, Frederick's island, or my island to wait there. After we get the results, you guys can return. Xianhe didn't land. He was floating above the small island as he shouted. Previously, we didn't care about life or death in the competition for the chief position. But it's different now. Today, the number of the descendants of the 8 great inheritances have been reduced greatly. Thus, if you think that your power isn't great enough to fight, you can give up the match by leaving the island while you're competing. Your opponent will not kill you. Of course, if you want to be persistent with your battle even though you know you can't endure it, you can't blame anybody if you die. Xianhe indifferently explained the rules. While he was talking, many low-realm warriors began to leave to the Death, Soul Control, and Corpse Chi Islands. Most of the warriors cultivating Despair Power Upanishad had left quickly. After Xianhe finished introducing the rules, there were only 5 warriors staying, including Yang Tian Emperor at first sky of Ethereal God Realm, the lowest realm, 3/3 sky of Ethereal God Realm, and the Ghost Mark expert at first sky of Incipient God Realm. The 3 at 3rd sky of Ethereal God Realm planned to use the magical features of Despair Power Upanishad to leap the realms and defeat that expert to get the leader position. They were confident. After listening to Xianhe, they thought that if they couldn't endure it, they could leave before their competitors can kill them. While the others were leaving, Shi Yin was carrying out his plan in the corner of the island. After he talked to Yang Tian Emperor for a while, he asked him to sit down and relax to receive the power from Senro. Yang Tian Emperor followed him immediately. As soon as Yang Tian Emperor sat down cross-legged, the ring spirit sent out marvelous energy fluctuations. The essence of Senro's power Upanishad that the ring spirit had collected before had turned into an energy stream that poured on Yang Tian Emperor's head and entered his soul altar. Yang Tian Emperor lifted his head to look at Xianhe. He winked at him to signal him to seize a little more time. Xianhe gave him a slight nod. He also looked at Yang Tian Emperor's head and contemplated. After a while, Xianhe looked upset as he sighed. He could feel Senro's aura from that energy stream. Although Senro, the chief of Despair Force, was extreme and odd, he had a good friendship with Xianhe. As the aura from Senro was so pure and magical, it told him one thing. Senro was utterly gone. Although he knew Senro had fallen for a long time, he couldn't verify it. But today, seeing Senro's incipient extent and the energy stream of his power Upanishad and energy, he had grief. Right at this moment, Ming Hao's voice arose. When will we start? After his voice ceased, he appeared by Xianhe and said, I've arranged the Chaos Island and Destruction Island properly. When the three of us signal, the competition for the chief position will begin. Frederick is done with the Dark Island and the Corrosion Island. We're waiting for you. Greetings, my benefactor. The ghost mark expert who had kept his eyes shut this entire time suddenly said. He stood up and welcomed Ming Hao. Ming Hao squinted and gave him a slight nod. Do your best to get the chief position. You'll repay my favor that ways. Make some effort. Baku will not fail your expectations, said the other respectfully. Xianhe stooped to see that man, snorted, and then said, almost ready. You have an early arrangement. It seems like you want Baku to become the Despair Chief. Ming Hao didn't change his countenance. Haven't you and Frederick arranged for Benton and Thor to compete for the Corrosion and Dark Chief positions? If you can arrange such a thing, I can also do the same. Let's see whose arrangement is better. He coldly glanced at Shi Yin, his eyes uncertain. He then looked at the blood vein ring. Afterward, his body flashed and he left the island. The despair energy emitted from Yang Tian Emperor turbulently, as if he had sunk into a vast sea of desperation. His face looked savage as he was struggling in pain. His soul seemed to have left the bind of his body. Shi Yin stood by him to guard him. His cold eyes glared at the four other experts cultivating despair power Upanishad. Except for Baku, who didn't change his visage, the other three experts at the peak of ethereal god realm were surprised. They looked at Yang Tian Emperor and felt a little wary of him. They had recognized that the most exquisite and terrifying energy fluctuation of despair power was his. This kind of energy fluctuation had gripped their minds and subdued their despair power Upanishad. It was the fear people felt when they saw the experts at the higher realm. They closed their eyes to sense. They were scared, so they made up their minds that when the competition began, they were going to their best to avoid Yang Tian Emperor. A magical light shot out of Xianhe's eyes. He quietly nodded. Now, when he looked at Yang Tian Emperor, he had respect for the warrior. After a while, Yang Tian Emperor roared like a beast, immortal demon blood boiling in his body. He woke up, his eyes crimson like blood. He took a deep breath to calm down and said to Shi Yin, It's okay now. Shi Yin looked at him and found that he was still at first sky of ethereal god realm. However, the energy fluctuations from him were really wonderful, and it was still rising. It seemed like he was fusing with tremendous power. After each second, he became stronger. Do you need more time? Said Shi Yin. No need. Yang Tian Emperor shook his head and grinned arrogantly. If I get more time, the battle won't be difficult anymore. It will be tasteless. At this moment, my realm and power haven't fused completely. I'm in a bad situation. Fighting in such conditions is really enjoyable, you know? It will satisfy me. Shi Yin was surprised. All right. He floated up to the sky, hovering by Xianhe and talking to him. We can start now. Moving further, he found that candidates for the chief position on the Dark Island, Destruction Island, Chaos Island, and Corrosion Island were waiting in silence. All of them had brutal auras. They were ready to fight and shed their blood for the chief position. Fei Lan and Leona were staying by the Corrosion and Dark Islands and waiting in worry. The ones they loved were about to compete there. Ming Hao, Frederick, we can start now. Xianhe suddenly shouted, his voice piercing through the blood clouds like thunderclaps reverberating above the islands in the blood sea. Ming Hao and Frederick shouted back to him. In their shouts like the dragon or the tiger roar, the blood sea became to surge. Many vortexes in the sky began to spin. Their shouts seemed to activate some magical formations that changed the blood sea. Chapter 1268. Compete for the chief position. Chapter 1268. Compete for the chief position _. The blood sea seethed. The dark red clouds descended from the sky like cotton fabric sheets, covering the 5 bone islands where the competitions for the chief position were about to begin. After the 5 islands, including despair, destruction, dark, corrosion, and chaos, were covered, a scarlet membrane appeared and sealed the 5 islands. That membrane had a rapid flow of energy moving around as if it had drawn the energy from the blood sea. Shi Yin focused on studying it, his eyes showing his surprise. He didn't know what kind of material the red membrane was made of, but it was a special barrier. It seemed tangible beyond just its condensed, shaped energy. It's the membrane of the black armored horn dragon. It has a special energy to create a defending formation. The black armored horn dragon is a powerful creature that comes from heavenly monster tribe. Their membrane is really tough. It's the most suitable material to create a formation. When the bloodthirsty force was still domineering, we used to collect so many types of precious materials in the world. Heavenly monster tribe had offered us this membrane. Xianhe explained to him as he saw that Shi Yin looked curious. Don't underestimate this membrane. The 8 chiefs have carved the powers Upanishads that we've comprehended. This membrane is the barrier that we've set up just in case the God Clan attacks the Holy Land. Unless someone who has reached 2nd or 3rd sky of a mortal realm attempts to tear this membrane, it's just a dream. 2nd sky or 3rd sky of a mortal realm. A strange light shot out from Shi Yan's eyes as he looked at Xianhe. Which realms do you, Frederick, and Ming Hao have? In this cosmos, how many immortal experts are there? The immortal realm was the ultimate realm that Shi Yin knew. Being at the immortal realm was like standing on the peak realm. There weren't many experts who had reached this realm in this vast sea of stars. Until now, he had known only Holy Beast Azure Dragon and Xianhe's team. At the same time, Spark of the God Clan, Gillette of the Imperial Dark Tribe, and Lena of the Heaven River Temple were at peak of incipient God Realm or false immortal realm. Frederick and I are at 2nd sky of immortal realm. Ming Hao, I suppose he's at 2nd sky, or even 3rd sky of immortal realm. Ming Hao has hidden his true body for many years, and he has rarely shown himself. If the Forbidden Island didn't have a commotion, he wouldn't have come here using his soul. I can't assess his realm and cultivation base if I can't see his body or soul. Xianhe explained. The God Clan's Godlord was at 3rd sky of immortal realm that year. To kill our master, he had his body shattered and his soul poorly damaged. The origin of the ancient continent he has absorbed was also smashed. It has been so many years and the Godlord hasn't shown up. I guess he hasn't healed yet, but now I'm not sure what realm he's at. Anyway, the 4 great heavenly kings, his 4 subordinates, are at the same realm as us. They are at least 2nd sky of immortal realm. The holy beast Azure Dragon of Heavenly Monster Tribe is also at 2nd sky of immortal realm. But since you got the Genesis fruit that has changed Grace Mainland, he will have a chance to reach 3rd sky of immortal realm. The warriors of the Imperial Dark Tribe. While they were talking, the competition for the chief position in the 5 islands had begun. To seize the chief position, the candidates of the 8 forces of the Bloodthirsty Force had released their ethereal extent and incipient extent and created a magnetic field of energy. The marvelous barrier made of the black armored horn dragon's membrane got some touches from Xianhe's team. When it covered the islands, it only let the warriors get out of the place but not enter again. Whenever they came out of the barrier, it meant that they had given up the competition. The last ones who stood on the islands were the winners and the new chiefs. How about Imperial Dark Tribe? Shi Yin arched his brows and asked. When Xianhe talked about Imperial Dark Tribe, he paused, his face awkward. The current chief of the Imperial Dark Tribe is a woman named Adele. She's Ming Hao's blood younger sister. That woman, and I used to have a complicated time. Audrey is her daughter with an ordinary aristocrat of Imperial Dark Tribe. He isn't worth mentioning, but Adele's realm isn't low. She's at 2nd sky of immortal realm. Imperial Dark Tribe has 2 more immortal realm experts, I suppose. Including Ming Hao, we can't ignore the power of Imperial Dark Tribe. Xianhe hesitated and then explained with a reluctant smile. Shi Yin wore an awkward face. Although Xianhe didn't say it clearly, through his facial expression and attitude, Shi Yin knew that Xianhe and Adele used to have a special relationship. Evidently, Xianhe had given up their romance, so Adele had chosen a normal aristocrat of her tribe as revenge. Perhaps the dispute between Xianhe and Ming Hao was related to this. Xianhe didn't say it clearly because he still had a knot in his heart. Shi Yin studied Xianhe and smiled. Precursor, I'm sure you were a distinguished man that year. Xianhe was an evil-looking, handsome man with style and taste. He must have been a lady's choice when he was young. At the same time, he was the death chief with real power. Shi Yin assumed that his life was really colorful with many beauties. That year, Adele was the princess of Imperial Dark Tribe. Of course, she was an arrogant character, though. Xianhe had opened her heart. They used to have a deep, romantic love, so she didn't want Xianhe to act rashly. She wanted him to be loyal to her. However, Xianhe was an easygoing man. Perhaps he couldn't endure Adele's bind, so he directly chose to let go of this beautiful flower to embrace a whole bush of flowers. As thoughts flashed in his head, Shi Yin imagined the events in the past and his grin became more bizarre. Xianhe gave a slight cough and spoke ironically. Well, that year, I had kind of abandoned all restraint. Because of this, I'd caused grudges everywhere. If Master hadn't imparted me the death power Upanishad, I would have been killed a long time ago. Precursor, you're fierce. Shi Yin appraised him wholeheartedly. Well, you're not bad either. Xianhe smiled relaxingly. I've been watching you discreetly for many years. Your behavior in this aspect is similar to mine that year. But you do have love. You can't walk through 100 bushes without having a leaf stick to your body. Well, you can't compare to me that year. That year, I didn't lack extremely beautiful women and I'd changed partners all the time. I'll tell you this. The name Xianhe had a unique meaning in the hearts of the ladies at that time. Xianhe didn't feel shame and he grinned. When he remembered his glorious past, his face was arrogant. Precursor, you're exotic. You've been chased around and almost killed because of love affairs. I'm totally convinced, Shi Yin said, his eyes strange. Cough, cough. Xianhe's middle-aged face blushed and he waved his hands. Nah, we shouldn't talk about this topic anymore. Besides us, the God Clan, the Heavenly Monster Tribe, and the Imperial Dark Tribe, the leaders of the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple also have reached the immortal realm. However, they've had their breakthrough in the past 10,000 years, so their realm isn't high. First sky of immortal realm. Yeah, and the president of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. This man is really mysterious and concealed. He must be at the immortal realm, but I'm not sure which sky. Xianhe frowned and said, well, it's the general situation. The experts who can reach the immortal realm are the best of the best in this vast sea of stars. He looked at the Despair Island beneath them. When his eyes fell on young Tian Emperor, they became brighter and deeper. Your great-grandfather has the potential to break to the immortal realm. He's supposed to be the chief of the Despair Force. In some aspects, he and Senro are alike, like objects molded out of the same material. Then, Xianhe paused and sighed. Where did you find Senro's remains? Shi Yin knew he knew, so he didn't want to conceal it. In the chaotic space basin? Indeed, Xianhe nodded. He had left to the space crack to find Master's remains. He had not returned ever since. I guess he had buried himself there. Although his power was marvelous, he didn't cultivate space power Upanishad. Sigh. Xianhe suddenly quieted down. Shi Yin stooped and said nothing. He observed the Despair Island underneath. At this moment, the 3/3 sky of Ethereal God Realm couldn't gain the upper hand from Baku, so they had left the island one after another. Young Tian Emperor hadn't joined the battle yet. He had sat in a corner from the beginning. He was waiting for them to attack him first. However, the other three had aimed at Baku. As they had sensed the strange energy from him, they didn't dare to provoke him. As for now, after the other three had left the island, only young Tian Emperor and Baku were there. Young Tian Emperor sat still. After Baku had forced the 3 peak of Ethereal God Realm experts to leave, the incipient extent above his head turned into a world of dark clouds that moved towards young Tian Emperor. The world of dark clouds was filled with lonesome, desperate auras. Deep inside the dark clouds was a freezing cold, desperate heart that gave people no hope of surviving. Seeing it, people could only think that they were about to fall into an endless, pitiful place somewhere. The intent domain rose in his incipient extent and covered Yang Tian Emperor. Shi Yin concentrated, his eyes surprised when he observed the battle underneath. Inside the torrential dark clouds, Yang Tian Emperor's eyes shot out bloodlight. The bloodlight was beautiful and powerful like a rainbow piercing through layers of dark clouds. Although they had the same despair power Upanishad, Yang Tian Emperor's intent domain had the hope of surviving in despair. The persistent, undying hope and despair like the never-ending flame of karma burned down Baku's dark clouds. They turned into thin smoke and then vanished. Yang Tian Emperor's flame of the hope of surviving was born in his despair. Although it wasn't fierce, it carried endless power as if it would never extinguish but keep being stubborn and dance. The brilliant light sparkled in Xianhe's eyes. He nodded and appraised. The despair power Upanishad that your great-grandpa has learned and experienced is the real despair power Upanishad. Baku's despair power Upanishad has only loneliness and desperation. This kind of despair isn't the truth of this Upanishad. The most marvelous, yet terrifying feature of the despair power Upanishad is the undying hope inside the despair. That hope is the strongest, most powerful feature of the despair power Upanishad. It's the core of the power that helps the warrior challenge others at a higher realm. Baku has stepped on the wrong turn on the path of despair power Upanishad. He's not your great-grandfather's rival. Yeah, I can see that. Baku doesn't have hope. He is desperate. It's not the real power of this Upanishad. Although his god power is more abundant, his understanding of the power is too low. Eventually, he will lose this battle, Shi Yin also concluded. He could feel Yang Tian Emperor's power, Upanishad, and energy increase every minute after he had received Senro's essence. The battle with Baku was like a chance to quench Yang Tian Emperor's iron hammer. His realm was increasing clearly. Unless Baku could kill him instantly, Baku was destined to lose. Chapter 1269. Sudden Change. Chapter 1269. Sudden Change _ Despair Island. The beams of blood light carried the hope of surviving as if they had the will of creatures, turning into the eternal fire of karma and burning the gray clouds. Yang Tian Emperor had a cold face, his mouth stiff. His red eyes were filled with valorous determination, as sign of the confidence he had accumulated after many battles. It was the blood of a great fighter. Above his head, a dark layer of desperation towered. However, it had the hope of life like a holy, fiery flame burning and rolling. The despair power Upanishad sublimated instantly. A brutal energy twirled around him. His skeleton sounded like a firecracker. Within a short moment, his energy increased one level. Xianhe's eyes sparkled. He has a breakthrough. Shi Yin was frightened. He focused and saw Yang Tian Emperor's soul altar. That soul altar was crystal clear like a perfect white crystal. His sea of consciousness, ethereal extent, and the host's soul were separated neatly at each tier. They were connected to each other by electrical beams created by earth and heaven energy. His soul altar seemed to be quenched and it radiated dazzlingly. Inside the beautiful halo, Yang Tian Emperor's body transformed. The immortal demon blood activated. He then turned into the immortal demon body with spiky armor. He looked fierce and mighty. At that moment, Yang Tian Emperor's realm and energy had entered a whole new world. He had transformed and become more intimidating. His despair intent domain had a hope that had increased his power massively. Gradually, that hope had washed away his despair. The eternal flame of his hope became more scorching as it burned down Baku's dark cloud of desperation. Baku had fear in his eyes as if he couldn't believe it. He looked angry. Deep inside his eyes, a gleam of fear slowly arose. This man has lost his fighting will. This battle is done. Xianhe rubbed his chin. It seems like you can become the master easily this time. Yeah, it's your luck, though. I didn't expect that you could find Senro's essence. Shi Yan's brows hadn't relaxed yet. He looked to the other islands and said, Not yet. The competitions on the other islands haven't finished. Thor and Benton are at second sky of incipient god realm. Frederick and I have invested a lot on them and gave them so many original incipient grade materials. They have trained their souls and bodies to increase their realm. They won't lose. Xianhe sounded relaxed. Xianhe rose his hand and a blood river extended from his palm, connecting to the corrosion island. He smiled and walked forward. When he stepped on the river, the blood river shrank magically toward the island. Shi Yan's soul consciousness moved around. He was so thrilled as he looked at the river. That blood river was created by Xianhe's soul power. When Shi Yan checked it, he could feel that the blood river was somehow like Xianhe's real body. Closing his eyes, Shi Yan could feel that this entire blood river had the same life magnetic field, aura, and soul fluctuation as Xianhe. That blood river was like another body of Xianhe or one of his clones. Some rumored that when the members of the immortal demon clan reaches a profound level, each drop of their blood could become a body. Even if their bodies burned up, as long as they still had a drop of immortal demon blood, they could always rebuild their bodies shortly after. Looking at that blood river, Shi Yan was shocked. He had a feeling that he was watching a lot of Xianhe's. It was like that blood river was the combination of countless bodies, skeletons, and souls of Xianhe. Having some assumption, Shi Yan's body sparkled like starlight and turned into a meteor falling on the corrosion island, standing by Xianhe. Then, Xianhe's blood river turned into hundreds of blood beams, disappearing into his sleeves. That blood river. Shi Yan looked at Xianhe. Xianhe was surprised. He understood it, so he grinned. This blood river is made of the immortal demon blood. I've been cultivating for so many years, so I got a lot of immortal demon blood. My body couldn't absorb them all, so I decided to refine them into a weapon. This blood river carries my spirit, mind, and blood. It's like an extent of my body. If I die one day, as long as this blood river exists, I can recover my body easily and rapidly. Listening to him, Shi Yan got frightened. Even though Shi Yan had finished replacing his blood and the blood running through his veins was the immortal demon blood, the total amount of immortal demon blood in his body, Yang Tian Emperor's body, and Blood Devil's body couldn't reach even 1% of this river. Considering this blood river, to what terrifying degree could Xianhe use the power of the immortal demon blood? As his realm was increasing, the demon blood was increasing unceasingly, and the life energy in his blood was going to be more abundant. As Shi Yan was at first sky of incipient god realm, the amount of immortal demon blood in his body was different from the amount of Xianhe, Yang Tian Emperor, and Blood Devil. The energy from a drop of Xianhe's blood could be more than the energy in 100 drops of blood from Blood Devil. As this entire river was made of immortal demon blood, its energy was more than earth-shaking. When you've reached immortal realm, you can have eternal life and endless time to cultivate. Then, you can create as much blood as I did. Xianhe laughed and patted his shoulder. Your master's successor. If you can reach the immortal realm, your achievement will surpass mine for sure. What you need is just time. Shi Yan kept silent. He said the truth. As Shi Yan was cultivating devouring power Upanishad, he could turn the essence chi and the soul altars of the dead into his energy to strengthen himself. He was still young. As long as he had enough time, he would reach Xianhe's level sooner or later. He could be even stronger than Xianhe and become an invincible existence that could compare to Bloodthirsty. Suddenly, Xianhe changed his visage and looked at the dark island, his face darkening. Shi Yan looked at the island and frowned. Thor, Leona's father, was there. Thor was the expert who Frederick and Xianhe had arranged and trained to compete for the chief position of the Dark Force. According to Xianhe and Frederick, Thor had the highest realm among the experts cultivating dark power Upanishad, second sky of incipient god realm. Xianhe thought that Thor would absolutely win. However, the situation didn't turn out as they had expected. The Dark Island was a place where people couldn't even see their own fingers. There were only 2 life magnetic fields on the island now. One was Thor, and the other belonged to the expert challenging him for the chief position. He was called Randolph. That man had first sky of incipient god realm cultivation base. He was from a far star area that no one had ever heard about him before. Xian He and Frederick didn't have any information about this warrior. The Blood Imperial Order had taken Randolph here from a remote area. As he had only first sky of incipient God realm, Xian He and Frederick didn't think that he could be a threat to Thor. But now, in the thick darkness, Randolph's life magnetic field was more powerful than Thor's. Xian He and Frederick felt strange. They were hovering above the dark island. Leona had stayed the entire time to observe the battle. At this moment, the scary scars on her face twitched, making her more fearsome. She was so worried. Seeing Xian He and Frederick, she slightly bowed to them. When they began the fight, the island hadn't been covered in darkness yet. As soon as my father and Randolph have activated their dark power Upanishad, the island was covered. But that man has something strange. She meant Randolph. She had observed and found that when Randolph fought the others, he had shown his ordinary abilities of a first sky of incipient God realm warrior. Nothing was strange about him at that time. However, after her father had defeated some candidates, leaving only him and Randolph on the island, Randolph then gathered the dark power and covered the entire island in just a breath. Right after that, Randolph's life magnetic field had surged intimidatingly. As people's eyes were covered, Randolph seemed to have activated some unknown energy that had rocketed his power in just a blink of an eye. The energy he had released was much more than Thor's at second sky of incipient God realm. In the dark, he had subdued Thor wildly. Eventually, he gained the upper hand. While Leona was explaining, Yin arrived. He released his soul consciousness to sense for a while, and then said, Randolph has stimulated his life energy to raise his energy. It's very similar to the burning purgatory of the Charteris family from the God clan. Oh no, it's the exclusive power Upanishad of the Charteris family. This Randolph is from the God clan. If he gets the burning purgatory Upanishad, he shouldn't be an anonymous warrior of the Charteris family. Yin rose his voice at the end. Harson was a member of the Charteris family from the God clan. He was extreme and wild. From some aspects, Harson was more fearful than Haig. The way they burned their blood and body to raise their energy could chill people's hearts. The secret technique Randolph was using was technically the burning purgatory, the exclusive power Upanishad of the Charteris family. This madness was what Harson used to have. So, you think it's strange? All of a sudden, Ming Hao, the Soul Control Chief, appeared like a ghost. He talked, his voice ironic and cold. Well, Gru, the former Chaos Chief, was also from the God clan, wasn't he? When our bloodthirsty force recruits, we don't care about their race. As for now, I have someone working for me inside the God clan. Why can't the members of the God clan join the competition to become the chiefs? Ming Hao looked at the small island covered in the darkness and said indifferently, as Gru could become the Chaos Chief, why can't Randolph? You guys should know that Randolph is Gru's descendant. Before Gru had followed our master, he was a genius of the Charteris family. As Randolph is his great-grandson, it's not a surprise that he knows the Charteris family's power Upanishad. Boom! A fume of dark smoke shot out of the island. After the smoke vanished, Thor's wounded body appeared. Thor's body was covered in blood. He looked exhausted, though. However, as soon as he was struck out, he didn't think and just headed to the dark island one more time. However, this island only allowed the warriors to get out and not to get in again. As he barged onto the barrier, his skin cracked immediately and his body was about to break. Thor looked restless and unwilling. He gritted his teeth and tried to attack the barrier one more time. The scars on Leona's face twitched. She clenches her fists, her sharp fingernails digging into her palm as it bled. Her eyes were fixed on Xian He and Frederick, begging them in silence. Xian He and Frederick were indifferent, their cold eyes heartless. It looked like they thought that since Thor failed, it was natural that he should kill himself. Chapter 1270, You're Not It. Chapter 1270, You're Not It Under. As Ming Hao could tell Randolph's identity clearly, it was evident that Randolph was on his side. Ming Hao had arranged for this warrior. Yin looked at Ming Hao and then at Xian He and Frederick. He was a little shaken. According to Xian He, they had arranged only Thor and Benton as they thought that the two of them could take the chief position of the Dark Force and Corrosion Force. With 2 votes from them and 2 from Xianhe and Frederick, they could ensure that Shi Yin had half of the chiefs supported him. However, Ming Hao was at another level, indeed. Without Yang Tian Emperor as the new face and Senro's essence, Baku would have become the new Despair Chief. The new chiefs of the Destruction Force and Chaos Force would listen to Ming Hao too. With Randolph, who had just replaced Thor, Ming Hao had defeated Xianhe and Frederick. At this moment, Shi Yin looked grave as he gazed at Ming Hao. He finally recognized that Ming Hao was worthy of holding his leading position in the Cortege of 8. Whether Xianhe and Frederick admitted it or not, Ming Hao's capacity and deeds were one level higher than theirs. After this competition for the chief position, Shi Yin could see clearly that Ming Hao, the one who didn't put him into his eyes and didn't let him enthrone, would never let him become the new master easily. Shi Yin instinctively turned around and looked at Yang Tian Emperor and at then Benton, who cultivated corrosion power Upanishad. He could only hope that Benton could win because Yang Tian Emperor was definitely going to win. If Benton won with Xianhe and Frederick, at least Shi Yin would have half of the chiefs supported him. If Benton also failed, Shi Yin would have 5 chiefs objected him enthroning. Then, he would lose the blood vein ring of Bloodthirsty. According to the protocol the Cortege of 8 had set up that year, he would have to hand back the blood vein ring and even his devouring power Upanishad inheritance. It meant that he would be killed. Boom! While he was wearing a heavy countenance and contemplating, Thor banged his head into the black armored horned dragon's membrane again. The intricate drawings on the membrane glowed and released the counterattack energy like a high tide. Thor's bones cracked when that energy hit him. Thor was now bleeding, and he was almost deformed. However, Xianhe and Frederick didn't say anything. Thor was heading to the membrane with no fear for death. He was trying to get through the barrier to fight Randolph one more time. Shi Yin had heard from Xianhe that unless he was an expert at the profound immortal realm, he could never tear or break this membrane since it was the defense that they had prepared to counter the God Clan's attack. They knew how strong the defense of the membrane was. Looking at Thor barge into the barrier and the counter energy from the membrane, everybody knew that Thor couldn't break it. Ming Hao didn't say more. He darkly watched the scene, his mouth making a harsh and cold curve. Dozens of warriors cultivating the 8 great inheritances of the bloodthirsty force scattered around and watched. No one talked. They all looked at Thor and watched him drain his energy and continue hitting his head into the barrier. They all kept their mouths shut. The palm of Leona's hand was bleeding as her fingernails had dug into the flesh there. The scars on her cheeks twitched like strange snakes. She was gazing at Xianhe and Frederick. Her breathing became heavy. The light from her eyes was so fierce like a volcano that was about to erupt. Xianhe and Frederick were still indifferent. They didn't put Leona in their eyes. 10,000 years ago, these two had soaked their hands in blood. How could the two cold and unfeeling hearts have mercy? They had invested a lot of efforts and materials to train Thor with the hope that he would win and become the chief of the Dark Force. Today, Thor was defeated, and it enraged them. They had given him a death sentence in their minds. They intended to watch him killing himself here. The rage compressed in Leona's heart had reached the limit. Finally, it burst out. She didn't care where she was. She didn't care that Xianhe and Frederick had tacitly agreed that Thor should kill himself. After a scream like a ghost's cry, she stormed towards Thor as if she was possessed. No. Thor turned his head abruptly, thundering, his mouth bleeding. The green veins on his forehead burst off. He screamed in fear. "Sirs, please forgive my daughter. It's I who didn't meet your expectation. I deserve death. Please consider her magical innate talents and spare her life." Thor had followed Xianhe and Frederick for a long time. He knew how bloodthirsty and cruel they were when they fought their enemies. Seeing Leona act against the other two's will, Thor was terrified. After he said that, he closed his eyes. His soul altar began to emit strange energy fluctuations. His body rapidly swelled up like a balloon. Leona's eyes were about to bleed. She knew that Thor wanted to explode himself. She wanted to rescue him, but her body was restrained. Xianhe had confined her. She looked at Thor. The agony and despair in her eyes had shaken people's hearts. In people's eyes, Thor's body ballooned. The energy fluctuations emitted from his soul altar became so fierce. He was about to destroy himself at any minute. Xian He, Frederick, and Ming Hao were unconcerned. The warriors cultivating the 8-power Upanishads around didn't know Thor. They stayed nonchalantly and quietly. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. When Thor was about to explode, billions of starlight dots fell on him like a shower of rain and entered his body. Thor's ballooning body shrank miraculously after the tender starlight had entered his body. Shortly after, starlight dots twirled around Thor. The bloodstains on his body were cleaned by the purifying starlight. Hovering above Thor's head was a radiant star that was emitting a mild and clear aura that had soothed his soul altar and protected his soul. Leona's eyes were red as if they were going to crack in any minute, but now they looked bewildered. Ming Hao's eyes sparkled with a cold light. He looked at Shi Yin and snorted, "A woman's benevolence." Xian He and Frederick frowned and looked at Shi Yin, who had walked to Thor. They didn't look happy or content with what he had done to stop Thor from destroying himself. Leona has followed me. I can't ignore her issue. I didn't take action earlier to see how heartless you guys can be. I understand it now. Shi Yin walked to Thor. Some drops of immortal demon blood dripped from his left index fingertip. The surging vitality from the immortal demon blood entered Thor's body and stabilized his wounds. It prevented his body from shattering and dysfunctioning. While Shi Yin was talking, Ming Hao, Xian He, and Frederick looked dark and cold while they watched him. Shi Yin smiled ironically and shook his head. What you've done today perhaps is your style that year. It was your typical principle when he was alive. That year, you'd ruled the world with the competence that could scare any clan. Well, you can play like that. But now, how many descendants does our force have? And how many of them are at incipient God realm? If you are persistent with that style, your warriors will all be killed before you encounter the God clan. His heart was chilled. From what Gulian, Xingming, Lina, and Holy Beast Azure Dragon had told him, he had guessed that the Cortege of 8 had internal conflicts all the time. However, he had thought that since this force had been weakened after 10,000 years, they would unite and avoid the internal strife. He was wrong. As soon as they got here, Ming Hao, Xian He, and Frederick had started their fight again. The competition to find the chiefs was also a bloody one. And now, as Thor had failed Frederick and Xian He, naturally, they assumed that Thor shouldn't live any longer. He should eliminate himself to vent out their dissatisfaction. He couldn't believe it. He finally understood why Gulian, Xingming, and Lina had just dodged him. They knew that it would be hard for him to get the master position because they knew that even when Bloodthirsty was alive, the other 8 had always been fighting with each other. They had never gotten along well. They were just the remaining force. There were only 3 survivors, but they were still fighting with each other. They could even ditch the warriors they had nurtured, even though Thor was a second sky of incipient God realm expert. Shi Yin thought that even if he got the position now to become the new master, this force would have no hope to resist against the God clan. He didn't see the slightest hope, to be honest. If the 3 chiefs Ming Hao, Xian He, and Frederick didn't change their opinions and this force still had internal strife, Shi Yin thought he shouldn't stay if they couldn't unite. You guys should continue doing what you want. Excuse me, I'm not going to accompany you. I understand now. I shouldn't have come here. Shi Yin held Thor with one hand and threw Leona a glance. I give up this master position. This blood vein ring belongs to your master. I'm returning it to you now. No. The blood vein ring's spirit sent him extremely turbulent soul energy. It had never been as proactive as now. It was too bad that Shi Yin didn't care about it. He slid the ring off his finger and threw it at Ming Hao. When I was in Black Iron City, didn't you want to take this ring? I'm going to fulfill your wish now. You're the leader of the Cortege of 8. I'm giving it to you. No. Don't let him touch me. I'm begging you. No. The ring spirit's voice ran directly into Shi Yan's brain. It has never sounded so restless and frightened. It seemed wary of Ming Hao a lot, and it screamed crazily. But only Shi Yin could hear it. You don't want to serve me as your master anyway. I'll fulfill your wish too. I will return you to the strongest subordinate of your master. You can deal with him. He's much stronger than me. You two have the same goal. You can collect his remains together. I believe that he will be interested in the conditions you've offered me." Shi Yin smiled faintly. "I will make you my master. I agree to make you my master. Please, get back the ring. No matter what, don't let him touch me." The ring spirit shouted begrudgingly as it was extremely scared. Shi Yin had a strange light in his eyes. Hearing the ring spirit screaming in his soul, he felt so wrong. Earlier, when the ring spirit met Bloodthirsty's finger, it had proactively cut off the connection with Shi Yin. Then, it wanted to separate from him. It didn't want to serve him anymore. It told him bravely that it had only one master. However, it was currently trying to protest. It didn't want Ming Hao to touch the ring as it was begging Shi Yin with the promise to make him its master. To return to his hand, the ring spirit had denied all the things it had stated before. It made Shi Yin feel so strange. Ming Hao stood there, his eyes deep and dark. He had an odd countenance as a vague shadow flashed in his eyes. The magical, pure soul energy arose from his family. He had locked the blood vein ring. No matter how hard it struggled, it couldn't get rid of his constraint. Ming Hao gathered the wisps of his soul that were scattered around the universe and held the ring in one hand. Right after that, the shadow in his eyes flew out and entered the blood vein ring directly. Indeed, Ming Hao smiled faintly and spoke darkly. "You're not it." Chapter 1271. The Ring Spirit. Chapter 1271. The Ring Spirit _ You're not it. Ming Hao held the blood vein ring, his face dark and evil and his eyes deep as he shouted. The black smoke suddenly fumed from the ring's surface. It was clearly the dark, sinister soul of Ming Hao. He used the soul to enter the ring to investigate. It seemed like he was struggling with the ring spirit inside to confirm his assumptions. Listening to Ming Hao, everybody changed their visages and looked at him. Xian He and Frederick exchanged looks, their faces stern. They didn't stop him and just frowned at the ring. As Shi Yin heard Ming Hao say that, he was shocked as he felt a lightning strike shoot through his head and tear the layers of the uncertain mist. As soon as Ming Hao's soul had entered the ring, the connection between Shi Yin and the ring spirit was gone instantly. Shi Yin didn't know what was going on inside the ring, but he guessed that the ring spirit wasn't normal. He screened his memory to recall the situation when he collected the two other parts of the ring spirit. The first time, it was in Broken Star area, and it was the part that Xian He had left. The memory Xian He had left shouldn't have any problem because after the ring spirit had fused with it, there wasn't anything strange. The second part he got on Desolate from the bones the Charteris family had refined from Xian Shan's skeleton. After that fusion, the ring spirit had been silent for a long time. Then, the ring spirit became unusual. It had concealed a lot of things. It didn't want to give Shi Yin more information. It seemed like the ring spirit had its own thoughts and didn't want to accompany Shi Yin anymore. When the ring spirit encountered Bloodthirsty's finger in Black Iron City of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, it had a massive change. It immediately cut off the connection with Shi Yin and talked to him arrogantly that it had only one master. After that event, the ring spirit seemed to become a complete stranger. It became more active when they communicated as it asked Shi Yin to find Bloodthirsty's remains, offering him great conditions. Considering these events, Shi Yin realized that after the ring spirit got the part of memory from Xian Shan's bones, it changed. It had become a stranger to him. Before that, the ring spirit was just a tool spirit that didn't have many complicated thoughts. After it had fused with the memory part from Xian Shan, the ring spirit seemed to turn into a creature with high intelligence. It became greedy and it knew how to entice people, persuading them with conditions and dealing with the others. Taking a cold breath, he looked at Ming Hao. Just like Xian He and Frederick, he was waiting for Ming Hao's explanation. The darkness on the dark island vanished. The winner that had defeated Thor, Randolph, of the Charteris family of the God Clan, floated up from the island. He looked a bit like Harson but much older. His countenance was stiff and indifferent as if he was a distant person. Although Randolph had only the first sky of incipient god realm, he had mastered the burning purgatory Upanishad. That's how he won the battle. Leaving the Dark Island, he didn't look at Xian He, Frederick, or Shi Yin. He just stood quietly behind Ming Hao with a respectful countenance. It looked like he was protecting Ming Hao. Xian He snorted, his eyes dark and sinister. He apparently hated Randolph. With his odd characteristics, if he had a chance, Xian He would mock and ridicule Randolph a lot. After a while, the shadow in Ming Hao's eyes became clearer, but its facial expression wasn't clear enough to be distinctive. His eyes rolled as he maintained the wisp of a soul inside the ring. He looked at Xian He and explained with a cold voice. That year, you, Lao Luo, and Xian Shan kept a part of the ring spirit's memory for each of you. You guys represented Master to choose the successors. Lao Luo did it in Grace Mainland with the big price of his death. You couldn't use the origin of ancient demon continent, so you failed. Then, Ming Hao paused, his face more bizarre. Xian Shan didn't choose God-blessed mainland of my imperial dark tribe. He instead chose ancient god continent of the God clan. All of you thought that Xian Shan had lost his mind and that I had filled him with illusions. Ming Hao snorted and said to Xian He, your brother Xian Shan wasn't the chief of any force, but in my heart, Xian Shan wasn't weaker than any of us. Until now, I really liked Xian Shan. Our friendship was really good. You guys had thought that it was me who had ordered Xian Shan not to go to God-blessed mainland, or he just wanted to give me face or something. Especially you, Xian He. You assumed that I had caused Xian Shan's death. You thought that because of me, Xian Shan didn't go to God-blessed mainland and went to ancient God continent instead to get killed there. Isn't it true? Xian He sneered. That year, my younger brother had idolized you. Because of you, he didn't go to God-blessed mainland. If he had gone to God-blessed mainland, he wouldn't have been murdered. At this moment, Xian He's evil and plain expressions were gone. He became sinister and sharp as if he had turned into someone else. I know there has always been a knot in Xian He's heart. There always has been. You kept thinking that I had caused the death of Xian Shan. That's why you had purposely hurt my little sister. You had coldly and heartlessly put an end to your relationship with Adele. You've made Adele embrace the pain for several thousand years. Until now, Adele hasn't forgiven me yet. She thought that it was I had damaged her relationship, the love of her life. Xian He's voice turned glum as she sighed. Xian He's visage became grimaced. He snorted and said nothing. Apparently, Ming Hao's words were true. However, he had an agony that was deep to the bones in his eyes. This kind of pain had tortured him for 10,000 years and made him suffer. It had eroded and rotted his heart through so many lonely, desperate nights. Frederick looked at Xian He, shaking his head as he sighed. He had sympathy for his good friend. Frederick and Xian He had befriended for so many years. He knew Xian He was a laid-back man who had destroyed many beauties from different clans. However, Frederick also knew that the current chief of Imperial Dark Tribe, Adele, also Ming Hao's blood younger sister, was the nightmare who had waited Xian He's whole life. She was the only one Xian He had loved for the rest of his life. Xian He had planned to hold her hand to be together through the endless river of time. Unfortunately, the Creator didn't want him to live in peace. When Xian He knew that Xian Shan didn't go to God-blessed mainland and went to ancient God continent to die there, he blamed everything on Ming Hao. He assumed that Ming Hao had caused his brother's death. He hated Ming Hao to his bones. However, Ming Hao had countless appearances, and he had never met him in person. Without a certain proof that Ming Hao had caused all of this, he couldn't do anything to him. But he couldn't be with Adele any longer. Because of Xian Shan's tragic death, he had thrown the revenge to the woman he had loved the most. He purposely hurt Adele and made the only one he loved bear loss and wounds. He didn't find happiness afterward, either. It was contrary that every time Adele felt hurt, Xian He felt the agony 10 times worse. Frederick still remembered when Xian He knew Adele had chosen an average aristocrat of Imperial Dark Tribe to marry. He had suffered from a great loss and pain. His heart died at that moment. Frederick understood this old friend of his more than anyone else. He knew how difficult it was to Xian He to survive 10,000 years. Sometimes, Frederick even thought that he would rather stay in the darkness than live a daily tortured life like Xianhe. In his eyes, the time Xianhe had suffered was the true darkness and suffocation. Xianhe, you never knew that when I realized that Xianshan wanted to go to ancient God continent, I had tried my best to stop him. I had begged him to go to God-blessed mainland. For him, I had shed off my face to discreetly contact my sister and asked her to yield. Minghao took a deep breath inside. Xianshan had agreed with me at that time. Then, he quietly came to ancient God continent. Just like us, he wanted to take revenge for our master. Xianshan had planned it carefully. He wasn't dumb. At that time, the God Lord's body had turned into ashes and they got nothing from his soul, while the 4 great heavenly kings had scattered around the universe to search our holy land. Ancient God continent didn't have the real experts at that time. But my brother died. Xianhe sounded harsh. The God clan didn't cause his death. It was the ring spirit. Minghao's eyes were cold. He stooped to watch the blood vein ring and spoke in a low-pitched voice. We all thought that Xianshan failed. None of us had ever thought that he actually succeeded. He had stolen a part of the ancient God continent's origin. With the power of the ring spirit, he had successfully guided a soul from another universe. But something bad had happened. I don't know what had happened back there. It still remained a mystery until now. But now, I know that the result is that the soul from the other universe had swallowed the part of the ring spirit that Xianhe kept. It had fused with the ring spirit's memory and carved itself on Xianshan's bones after he died. After Xianshan died, the ring spirit had trained and strengthened Harson. Listening to him, Xianhe, Frederick, and Shi Yin discolored in fright. My force has been investigating this for so many years. We've finally come up with that conclusion, but I wasn't so sure until Shi Yin had fused with the soul from Xianshan's bone into the blood vein ring. Still, he didn't come to the Holy Land after that. He didn't know things he should know. From that event, I've made my vague conclusion. In Black Iron City, I asked the president of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce to deliver Master's finger as I wanted to confirm it one last time. When I found that it was so craving for that finger and the connection between the ring spirit and Shi Yin became so thin and I got more certain, I sent my soul to Bai Yifeng and Mu Wei to seize the ring and check it. But Frederick's monster corpse had broken my plan, continued Ming Hao. You'd arrange for the president of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce to deliver that finger? But why is he still allowing my monster corpse to get there? Asked Frederick. He's a businessman, replied Ming Hao. You should continue, Frederick contemplated and then nodded. I couldn't touch the blood vein ring so I couldn't verify it, but I was observing continuously. When this kid came to the Holy Land and the Devouring Island, he opened the ancient formation. After he got out, he bragged about collecting Master's remains. When that happened, I understood it clearly. Then, Ming Hao looked at Shi Yin, snorted, and said, I could almost confirm that the original ring spirit was gone. But I also doubted you. I wasn't so sure if you were the real you. I doubted that you were killed and that thing had possessed your body. I thought maybe it had bound your soul, so you would be under its control. In my thoughts, in any of these circumstances, I would never allow you to be the next master. I could guess the new ring spirit's purpose. After it fused with the 3 pieces of the ring spirit's memory, it knew every secret that even the cortege of 8 didn't know. It wanted to collect our master's remain to possess his body. That way it could become our new master. Shi Yin, Xianhe, and Frederick were petrified. They now almost believed in all of what Ming Hao was telling them. They were restlessly anxious as they looked at the ring. Chapter 1272, Seal. Chapter 1272, Seal _ According to Ming Hao, Xianhe had successfully stolen the origin of the God Clan's ancestral star to summon a soul from another universe. However, something had happened. That alien soul had swallowed the ring spirit's memory and killed Xianshan. When people looked at the blood vein ring now, they were cold and harsh. Xianhe's face became less tense. He frowned and said nothing. Ming Hao's eyes raked around. The shadow in his eyes surged soul energy. A voice arose in the sea of consciousness of many warriors. Unauthorized warriors should leave this place at once. Leona's restraint was lifted. She bowed to Shi Yin to show her gratitude and then looked at Thor. Shi Yin knew what Ming Hao was about to say was very important. He nodded and then sent a beam of his star energy to rise Thor up and move him to Leona. Leona brought Thor away immediately. At the same time, Randolph left as Ming Hao had ordered him. Before he left, he quietly glanced at Shi Yin as if he was curious about him. Shi Yin didn't move. The warriors of the 8 forces around them had quickly left the area. Ming Hao blinked and sent a wisp of a soul to the sealed island underneath. The membrane opened a small corner for him. He directly plunged onto the island. Xian He, Frederick, and Shi Yin also landed. Then, the membrane closed again, sealing the island and separating the 4 from the world outside. "Let me seal it." The white bones next to him rattled strangely like wind raking through the forest. Shi Yin, Xian He, and Frederick kept silent and looked at him. Shortly after, the departed souls slowly emerged from the endless void, getting through the dark membrane and entering Ming Hao's head. Shi Yin discolored in fright. He was shocked and fearful. Those souls seemed to be wisps of Ming Hao's soul. They had the same life magnetic field and energy fluctuations of his power Upanishad. They were somehow similar to the blood river that Xian He had created. There were billions of wisps like that. Those souls were cold and had consciousness. Slowly, they had massively filled the sky of the dark island. Each of the departed soul was one Ming Hao with soul control power Upanishad. Billions of souls had come towering below the entire sky. The soul energy fluctuated massively as if they were in the 9 Serenity Hell. They made this island a secret place that collected creatures' souls. Those souls gathered, condensed, and created a sacrificial altar. Quite the contrary, the body that Ming Hao had posséd was now very feeble. At this moment, it was just a speaker that transmitted Ming Hao's voice. The sacrificial altar built of billions of souls was quickly formed. Ming Hao's pure and immense soul energy overflowed from his altar like an ocean. His altar seemed to return to the final destination of the soul in the vast sea of stars. It had an attractive magical power to the souls. This altar of his was a little vague, just like his face that no one could see. Suddenly, countless marvelous symbols created by the souls flew out of Ming Hao's altar. Those symbols were like wisps of a soul arranged into different and complicated formations. They contained the utmost truth of the power Upanishad. Watching them, Shi Yin felt like he was in the fountainhead of the powers Upanishads. The marvelous heavenly formations with Ming Hao's aura had supernatural power as if they were Ming Hao's pure consciousness. Those formations fell on the blood vein ring like so many beautiful and exquisite nets covering the ring. With a closer look, the others then saw the bloodlines on the surface of the blood vein ring wiggle and create a savage, small face. That face was the ring spirit. As it felt Ming Hao's seal coming, it tried to struggle to get rid of the blood vein ring to fight against Ming Hao once. That small, ferocious face was made of blood lines, which was so peculiar and sinister. At first glance, Shi Yin was a little shaken. He could even feel the hair on the nape of his head rising. That face was like an extreme, evil creature that wanted to swallow and destroy the whole world. Ming Hao's soul altar rose and sent out magical energy waves. The layers of marvelous formations descended and locked the blood vein ring. The small face was still wiggling, but it was so hopeless. The sealing work lasted for 1 hour. It was about to finish. Ming Hao had created dozens of thousands sealing formations and attached them on the blood vein ring surface to bind the ring spirit. The feeble connection between Shi Yin and the ring spirit was cut off. He couldn't sense the ring spirit's aura anymore. After Ming Hao had created dozens of thousands of sealing formations, his altar had shrunk. Suddenly, his altar divided into many wisps of dark smoke and vanished just like the black clouds that were blown away by a tornado. These soul flows then returned to different star areas to continue their control to the forces in different forces. The warrior Ming Hao had possessed suddenly revived. The shadow came back to his eyes. Ming Hao hadn't left. We don't know where the soul that Xian Shan had guided here comes from. It caused Xian Shan's death and then nurtured Harson of the Charteris family. I think it had planned to steal Harson's body. It had prepared for that moment this entire time. When you guys were on Desolate, Yin had fused it with the blood vein ring. It then swallowed the original ring spirit. After it found that Yin had the devouring power Upanishad, it gave up Harson and made Yin its new target. Evidently, this thing has unceasing greeds. While it was observing and waiting for the chance to take Yin's body, it met our master's finger. As it had completely fused with the ring spirit, it knew many of our master's secrets, more than any one of us. It then got a new idea. It wanted to collect master's remains and then occupy his body. That way, it could have been able to skip a long time of cultivating and reach the terrifying height shortly and directly, said Ming Hao. Why didn't you fulfill its wish? It has swallowed the ring spirit's memory. If it could use Bloodthirsty's body and become a real entity, with its understanding of Bloodthirsty's powers Upanishads, it would have been an excellent successor. It meant that Xian Shan had succeeded. He had found an excellent heir for Bloodthirsty. This successor has swallowed the ring spirit, killed Xian Shan, and it even attempted to steal my body and Bloodthirsty's remains. I think he's more suitable than me. Don't you think so? Yin was moved. Listening to Ming Hao, Yin felt a little strange. If it hadn't killed Xian Shan or swallowed the original ring spirit and just replaced Harson, I would have allowed it to follow our protocol. It could have fought you to compete for the master position, but now, I will never let it do that, shouted Ming Hao. He looked at Xian He and Frederick and then said, Xian Shan was my best friend, and the original ring spirit was the precursor of my imperial dark tribe. How could I let it do whatever it wants? Xian He and Frederick changed their countenances and said in unison, Your precursor? Yin was bewildered. 100,000 years ago, the first generation of experts of Heavenly Monster Tribe, Immortal Demon Clan, Imperial Drac Tribe, and God Clan had come to Desolate. I think you guys knew this. Our Imperial Dark Tribe's precursor had buried his body there. The ice blue light protection around Desolate is his sole altar and incipient extent, said Ming Hao. So that light protection isn't all of the soul of Imperial Dark Tribe's precursor? The ring told me like that. It also said that the holy mountain there used to be the body of the Immortal Demon Clan's precursor. The blood sword is refined from his spine too. Yin intervened. Ming Hao looked at him and said, The incipient extent and the soul altar of my precursor had turned into a light protection, but his soul had lost its memories and become a tool spirit, merging with the blood vein ring. It said the truth about the holy mountain and the blood sword. They're the remains of the immortal demon precursor. Xian He, Frederick, and Yin were stern. As they had come to this point, they had finally reached the knot that had troubled their minds for many years. Where did Bloodthirsty go? He had the blood sword and the blood vein ring. The blood sword was the immortal demon precursor's spine, and the ring spirit inside the blood vein ring was the host soul of the Imperial Dark Tribe's precursor. From these details, Yin knew that Bloodthirsty used to visit Desolate and have a big harvest on Desolate. However, Desolate opened once every 10,000 years. Every time it opened, the members of the 4 great clans went there. The secret scriptures of the 4 clans had a detailed record for each time Desolate opened. However, they didn't mention anything related to Bloodthirsty. It meant that Bloodthirsty wasn't there whenever Desolate opened. So, how could he enter Desolate? How could he get the remains of the immortal demon precursor laying on Desolate and refine the soul of the Imperial Dark Precursor to make it the ring spirit of the blood vein ring? Those were the questions that they couldn't answer yet. Throughout the past 10,000 years after Master had fallen, I've always used the forces I can use to investigate this. I want to know Master's identity. Today, I discovered an earth-shaking finding, a tremendous assumption, said Ming Hao. Yin and the other 2 were shaken. They pulled themselves together and wholeheartedly focused on listening to him. Bloodthirsty's profile and identity were the riddles that none of the big clans and forces around the universe could discover. Every famous expert was extremely curious about this riddle. No exception. What kind of finding is that? What's your assumption? Seeing Ming Hao still arranging his thoughts, Frederick couldn't hold it anymore and he shouted. 10,000 years ago, we had begun to follow our master. Besides his power and mysteries and the marvelous power Upanishad inheritances he gave us, there's something we can't neglect. We all felt the familiar aura from him that made us feel close to him. That kind of aura couldn't be described. I'd asked Gru of the God Clan, Gatto of the Heavenly Monster Tribe, and even you Xian He. You guys had admitted that you did have the same feeling. Did you remember that? Ming Hao looked at Xian He. Xian He nodded. I remember. You did ask me this. At that time, I discussed with Xian Shan, and we agreed that we felt the fond aura from him. That aura had made us close to him and followed him naturally. That feeling made us trust him and feel that he would never hurt us. It's hard to describe that feeling. He remembered what they had experienced in the past and confirmed Ming Hao's words. Chapter 1273. An Earth-Shaking Conjecture. Chapter 1273. An Earth-Shaking Conjecture _ Why have I never had that feeling? Frederick rubbed his head. It's the key, hissed Ming Hao. Why do only the descendants of the God Clan, Imperial Dark Tribe, Heavenly Monster Tribe, and Immortal Demon Clan feel this aura from Master? Don't you think it's weird? In our realm, we can easily come to this point. Only when Master had the blood of our races can he make us feel close and attached to him. Xian He, Frederick, and Shi Yin were shocked and they were gawking. You're right. Our Master has the combined blood of the precursors from the God Clan, Imperial Dark Tribe, Heavenly Monster Tribe, and Immortal Demon Clan. That's why we didn't need to spend a lot of effort to cultivate the power Upanishads he had imparted to us. Initially, he had chosen the members of the four great creatures because he knew about the advantages of our races. He knew that only the descendants of the four races could maximize the power of his power Upanishads. Ming Hao paused for a moment and then stressed each word. It's because our master was the combined product of the bloodlines of the precursors from the four great creatures that had come to desolate 100,000 years ago. Shi Yin, Xian He, and Frederick were dumbstruck. Strong waves raised high in their minds. It was unimaginable that Bloodthirsty was the fusion of the bloodlines of the four great creatures. As he had the advantages of the four great races, he was really supernatural. Xian He and Frederick kept silent for a long time as they were trying to digest the earth-shaking conjecture that Ming Hao had just provided them. For the time being, they thought that their brains couldn't function well. After a while, Xian He took a deep breath to calm down his surging mind. Isn't it a little subjective to come to such a conclusion with only our close feelings to Master? Actually, he had believed half of it because he understood Ming Hao well. If Ming Hao wasn't 100% sure, he would never say or confirm anything. Recently, he had discreetly studied the riddle of Bloodthirsty's identity. He had the same idea, but the evidence he had wasn't enough. Today, listening to Ming Hao, he had cleared the clouds in his head. To find the evidence for this, I went to see Holy Beast Azure Dragon of the Heavenly Monster Tribe myself. He's the oldest warrior alive. He and Holy Beast White Tiger were born in Grace Mainland at the same time. Azure Dragon has lived for 100,000 years. When I told him my conjecture, Azure Dragon told me that he used to meet Master, and he could feel the special aura of White Tiger from Master. As he was born at the same time as White Tiger, and they are both the ancestors of Heavenly Monster Tribe, he should be much familiar with his aura. When he told me that, I was so certain about this. Anyway, you know how I work. I'm still finding a way to prove it. Recently, Azure Dragon contacted me and asked me to meet one person. Shi Yin knows this person well. Ming Hao turned to Shi Yin. Who? Shi Yin was surprised. He's called Ghost Hunter, said Ming Hao. Shi Yin was a little amazed. What happened? Ghost Hunter is the son of Heavenly Ghost and Hunter Dragon. The Heavenly Ghost is the special dark beast of our Imperial Dark Tribe. Not many people know about it. Actually, it has the bloodline of the Imperial Dark Tribe. And why is that? It's the secret of the Imperial Dark Tribe, so I can't tell you guys. However, I can tell you that the blood in the Heavenly Ghost's body isn't very different from the members of the Imperial Dark Tribe. Hunter Dragon is the beast living in the monster area with the bloodline of Heavenly Monster Tribe. I heard that Azure Dragon said that Hunter Dragon used to eat some immortal demon warriors to get their blood. Heavenly Ghost and Hunter Dragon gave birth to Ghost Hunter, which is a creature with the bloodline of the Imperial Dark Tribe, Heavenly Monster Tribe, and Immortal Demon Clan. He's a miracle as he could survive. But then, if we have this miracle of the 3 bloodlines, it's possible to have someone with the 4 bloodlines of the 4 great creatures like our master. Azure Dragon contacted me and brought me to meet Ghost Hunter. We had taken 1 drop of his blood. Azure Dragon said that it was almost perfect blood. He told me that our master's blood is the perfect blood that has combined the blood of our ancestors. Ghost Hunter's blood is just a line apart from perfect. And now, look at this drop of blood. Let's see if it's quite similar to our master's blood. Ming Hao finished at the area where his altar used to appear a drop of blood. This drop of blood was extremely peculiar. It was like a clear, green crystal. Blood should be in liquid form, but this drop of blood was both in liquid and solid forms at the same time. It shifted between the 2 forms continuously. It was so strange that it had puzzled people. Xian He and Frederick were shocked to see that drop of blood. They kept quiet. Shi Yin didn't need to contemplate to find the truth. Bloodthirsty's blood was very similar to Ghost Hunter's. Ming Hao had a marvelous capacity. He knew that the ring's spirit wasn't the original one, and he had solved the riddle of Bloodthirsty's identity. He had investigated and found that he was the combination of the bloodlines of the 4 great creatures' ancestors. This man was worth his leading position in the cortege of 8. Compared to him, Xian He and Frederick weren't really better. "Do you believe me now?" said Ming Hao, his voice fake. Xian He and Frederick nodded. But the truth isn't that simple. Master's body was the combination of the blood of the precursors from the 4 races. Have you ever thought about his soul? Where did it come from? Ming Hao asked again. Shi Yin, Xian He, and Frederick were bewildered again as they shook their heads. "I don't know either." Ming Hao also shook his head. "I've spent 10,000 years to solve the riddle of Master's bloodline. I couldn't figure out the origin of his soul and the forbidden energy he had mastered." Every word Ming Hao had spoken had put Xian He, Frederick, and Shi Yin deep into thought. When he talked about Bloodthirsty soul, the other 3 frowned and felt like they were walking in the thick mist that they couldn't get through. Shi Yin, Xian He, and Frederick were standing on the sealed Dark Island to listen to Ming Hao conclude his investigation after 10,000 years of studying and exploring. They knew more about the ring's spirit and Bloodthirsty, and now they had a new perception when they looked at Ming Hao. While they were talking, the warriors from the 8 forces had gathered by the Dark Island and waited silently for their orders to carry out the next steps. Ming Hao lifted his head, talking. "They're done?" Xian He and Frederick sensed and then nodded. They also got the result. Benton and Yang Tian Emperor are the new chiefs of Corrosion and Despair forces. In addition to you 2, he got the 4 chiefs to support him be the new master. Ming Hao looked at Shi Yin, but his eyes didn't look dark and cold anymore. "The chiefs of the destruction and chaos follow me. In addition to Randolph, I have half of the chiefs to vote. We know that unless he gets the support from 5 chiefs, he can't enthrone, right?" Frederick was bewildered for a while and then said, "The sinister soul that had tried tricking us is confined in the ring now. You know Shi Yin wasn't possessed. He's the only one with Master's power Upanishad. Everything is clear now. Why do you still want to stop him?" Xian He's face got cold once again. "Well, he has only first sky of incipient God realm. He's not qualified to order me around. I don't object to him being the new chief. However, unless he defeats me one day, I will never call him master." Ming Hao pouted his lips. "Nah, it's good that you don't object. He's enthroning now just to get the flag of reunion for our 8 forces. Of course, we won't give him all the authorities." Xian He nodded and smiled evilly. "Shi Yin, when you reach the immortal realm and defeat me, I will call you my master sincerely. In our place, we talk with the fist. It's the rule that Master had set up when he founded this force. It will never change even if 1,000 or billion years pass." Frederick laughed and patted Shi Yan's shoulders, talking frankly. "Kid, put more efforts and be enthusiastic. As long as you can defeat us, you can do whatever you want. It has not 300 years, and you reached your current realm. Well, With this progress, I think it won't be long until you can kick our asses. If you're restless, put more effort then. Haha, we're more than 10,000 years old now. Don't make us wait for a long time. The God Lord has awakened. The 4 great heavenly kings are summoned to protect him. I think he's recovering his power currently. I got the intelligence that the God Clan has mobilized the slaves in the God-perishing land back to ancient God continent. I think the God Lord wants to use those slaves to forcefully boost his power, said Ming Hao. This war isn't really positive for us, Xian He frowned. Xian He, I wonder if what I told you today has untied the knot in your heart after 10,000 years or not. If yes, you should go to Imperial Dark Tribe to talk to Adele and admit your mistakes. Maybe the Imperial Dark Tribe aren't going to stay neutral anymore. They may go with us, suggested Ming Hao. Xian He snorted and didn't answer him. That year, the Immortal Demon Clan was closest to us. Currently, the members of this clan have scattered around the Sea of Stars. Still, they have a close connection with you, Xian He. Although they don't cultivate the 8 great power Upanishads, they have strong competencies. In the past 10,000 years, they are always the enemy of the God Clan. You can deal with them, Xian He, Ming Hao continued. He turned to Shi Yin. Because you fused with Grace Mainland's origin and the Genesis fruit, Heavenly Monster Tribe has no choice. They have to fight with us shoulder by shoulder. If Xian He can persuade my sister, 3 out of 4 great races will support us. This war will be easier for us. You should use the identity as the master of the Bloodthirsty force to meet the current masters of the Thousand Fantasy sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple. If you can persuade them, we will gain the upper hand in this war. After Shi Yin had thrown the blood vein ring to Ming Hao, his passive situation had overturned like a miracle. Ming Hao, the toughest challenge, didn't want to trouble him anymore. Right at the beginning, Ming Hao hadn't aimed at Shi Yin but that ring. I've sealed the ring spirit. This ring represents your master identity. You should wear it, but you have to be careful. No matter what, don't break the seal or drop it. The memories it has holds a lot of secrets that we don't know. I can't kill it because I don't want to lose those secrets of the Forbidden Land and our master. I will think about how to deal with it. Before I can do that, you should protect it well, Ming Hao advised Shi Yin carefully. Chapter 1274, Heavenly King Light. Chapter 1274, Heavenly King Light _ Inside the God Zenith, God Clan's ancestral star. The God Lord in Haig's body was sitting cross-legged inside the ivory clouds. It contained extremely thick spirit chi and essence of life. He could use those energies directly to increase his power. Underneath him was a yellow river where many dark prison demonic flowers were floating. Those flowers were really big. They were more than several meters tall, and each of them covered more than one bodies from different races. However, the lowest realm of those victims was First Sky of Ethereal God Realm. This yellow river had several thousand dark prison demonic flowers that confined almost 10,000 high realm warriors of many clans. Every second, the warriors inside the demonic flowers lost some of their energy to them. Their faces were so thin and their bodies were dry like a bamboo stick. They looked like skeletons inside a skin bag, which was so pathetic. Their eyes that had sunk deep into their sockets showed only pain and despair, their faces bewildered. The buds of the dark prison demonic flower covered them and drew their essence chi and vitality in every second, turning them into ivory wisps of mist that raised and congregated at the clouds underneath the God Lord. By the river, some elders of the God Clan's Elder Committee were ordering their subordinates in a low-pitched voice, their faces respectful. At this moment, dozens of battleships were anchored around the God Zenith. Countless rhombus crystal war chariots were moving back and forth, transporting more experts from the other star areas. They were going to be brought to the God Zenith to become the materials for the God Lord's recovery. Monthly, several hundred experts at Ethereal God Realm were transported here through the 7 sea territories of the God Clan. In the past 10,000 years, the God Clan's invading steppe had never ceased. They had set up many God-perishing lands inside medium or high-level star areas to imprison the experts that didn't want to obey the God Clan. Currently, The Elder Committee had ordered to bring those slaves to supply the God Lord with their energy. Inside the mountain, the God Lord closed his eyes as if he had merged with the sky, his sole consciousness establishing a marvelous connection with this planet. The elders of the Elder Committee stayed around the God Lord and watched him in fear and respect. In their eyes, the God Lord was now the heart of this ancient continent. This marvel of his fusion with the ancient continent was like milk and water blending, which the former Hague couldn't compare to. Every day, they could feel the God Lord's power increase steadily. The great elder, Fengju, felt this clearly as he was the expert who had reached a mortal realm, which was one level higher than Spark. However, when he used the soul consciousness of the expert at a mortal realm to sense the resonance between the God Lord and this earth and heaven, he was shaken as if he was facing the prestige might. This great difference between their realms couldn't be made up with energy. Fengju used to have rebellious thoughts, but now it was extinguished. He had even burned down his wisps of memories and eliminated them. He was afraid that the God Lord would figure it out. Great Elder, have they, the four great heavenly kings, fallen in the vast sea of stars? You've called them on behalf of the God Lord, but none of them have come back. Has something bad happened to them? In a remote corner inside the mountain, the newly promoted third sky of incipient God Realm Elder looked doubtful and frowned. He hadn't experienced that era. He knew about the fame of the four great heavenly kings, but he had never seen them. Recently, many elders of the Elder Committee were suspicious about whether the four heavenly kings had survived the long river of time. Some elders with the same concern turned to look at Fengju and pried. Fengju squinted and looked at Spark. Well, Spark hadn't come back after several thousand years. He's alive, right? He hasn't reached a mortal realm, but he can live thousands of years. Do you think that the four great heavenly kings have false immortal realm? Spark was sitting cross-legged in the corner. He snorted and coldly glared at the elder who had just voiced his concerns. When the four great heavenly kings spread their names around the universe, I was just at first sky of incipient God realm. At that time, they were at first sky of a mortal realm. It has been 10,000 years. Unless they don't want to live anymore, who can kill them? Those suspicious elders shut their mouths when they heard Spark say so. God Lord. His power seems to not be as powerful as they've rumored. Elder Fengju, he said again. Fengju changed his visage as fear swarmed over him. He didn't dare to look at the God Lord and just hissed at that elder. Shut up. He didn't know why his heart was throbbing anxiously and frantically all of a sudden. He was at first sky of a mortal realm, so he had an exquisite sensibility of soul fluctuation and internal air movement. Only the experts at a mortal realm could vaguely touch this kind of sensibility, which was marvelous and incredible. This kind of insecure and anxious feeling had never happened to him in the past 10,000 years. Fengju was skeptical if it was true. However, after a while, he knew why he got such a feeling. He was frightened, and he looked at the entrance where a good-looking, brawny man was walking as if he was taking a walk in an empty park. Fengju couldn't help but quiver. That man had sideburns outline his manly, rough face. The contours of his face made him look like he was carved out of the granite with clear corners. He was holding a big red wine bottle where the sun, moon, and stars were shining. He was strolling, his eyes murky as if he was enjoying his wine. The man was wearing hempen clothes that were completely opposite to the precious and luxurious costumes that the God Clan had. His clothes weren't neat. There were many holes on his elbows and knees. He looked like a beggar to the others. While walking, the man didn't forget to take sips from his bottle. He was humming some folk songs with vulgar lyrics too. His appearance contrasted a lot to the high-echelon members of the God Clan who claimed to be elegant and noble. In this area, the elders who had just been promoted had luxurious clothes and wore a lot of rings where they stashed their huge fortune. They had enjoyed the fame and wealth of the God Clan for 10,000 years. The 12 families of the God Clan served them, so the elders had become first-class characters with power and wealth in this universe. The elders looked at the tall man striding toward, their faces surprised. They felt strange, indeed, because the man's appearance and aura were totally different from theirs. He looked like a low peasant in the low-level star areas that the God Clan had conquered. At the same time, they didn't feel any energy fluctuation from that man. The elder who had just talked to Feng Zhu about his suspicion of the God Lord darkened his face and shouted, "How could that peasant get in here?" If he paid attention to the facial expressions of the previous generation elders like Feng Zhu and Spark, he wouldn't have said that. Because at this moment, Feng Zhu and Spark had quietly stood up and bowed slightly to greet the man with a respectful face. The new elders of this generation make me disappointed. The man glanced at the elder who had just spoken to him. His hand that didn't hold the bottle of wine grabbed the void. A dazzling sun emerged in his palm. The purifying light had emitted like a waterfall and covered the elder who had doubted the God Lord earlier. In 3 breaths, that elder exploded and turned into ashes that vanished. His soul altar was even purified and left nothing. Without giving the poor elder another glance, he took another swig from his bottle. He rudely spat on the ground and said to Feng Zhu and Spark, "If the new elders have such makings, they should become the meat pellets for our master to recover. In that way, we can save our God Clan from shame." The newly promoted elders had their bodies stiffen as they heard him. They stood still and didn't dare to move. They were aghast indeed. Feng Zhu, Spark, and many elders of the previous generation stood still and nodded with a forced smile. No one dared to retort. The man looked at the God Lord hiding in the ivory clouds and kneeled. "Greetings, Master." The God Lord's closed eyes parted to a slit to look at the beefy man and gave him an indifferent nod. "Where are easygoing, carefree, and divine marshal?" "They're on the way back. I was closest to the ancestral star, so I come to meet Master first," Heavenly King Light said with his head low. "My power hasn't recovered yet. I can't send my orders to them through the star areas. You tell Easygoing to go to Imperial Dark Tribe first. He doesn't need to come back now. Talk to Adele to know their decision. Tell Carefree to get the confirmation from the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple. Ask Divine Marshal to go find the president of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. We need their intelligence to know the plan of Bloodthirsty Force, Heavenly Monster Tribe, and Immortal Demon Clan," ordered the God Lord. Heavenly King Light nodded. Shortly after, the 3 wisps of Heavenly King Lia's soul flew out like 3 meteors and disappeared. Light shook 3 times, and a brilliant light curtain emerged above his head with the endless marvel of heaven. After several seconds, the 3 meteors returned to him and disappeared into his nape. He stood still and said respectfully, "Easygoing, Carefree, and Divine Marshal have changed their routes. They asked me to say congratulations to you. Welcome back to this world, our Lord." The God Lord nodded. Heavenly King Light pondered for a while and then said, "Master, I found Bloodthirsty's skull. Please check it out." A blind light as big as a mill covered something round and rolled towards the God Lord. Many elders of the God Clan were shocked when they heard what the Heavenly King Light had said. They looked at that chunk of light. Their eyes thrilled. They had spent 10,000 years to find it, but they couldn't find many pieces of Bloodthirsty's remains. Today, Heavenly King Light had returned with Bloodthirsty's skull. It made them so excited. Bloodthirsty's remains had 2 core things: his heart and his skull. They were the most important things about Bloodthirsty's body. They could make any expert crazy and crave for them. God Lord sat cross-legged on the cloud and looked at Feng Zhu. Feng Zhu shuddered and spoke gingerly and respectfully. "Here are the 5 pieces of Bloodthirsty's remains that we've collected. Please check them." 5 heavenly fragrant soul-soothing jade boxes flew out of his sleeves and moved towards God Lord. Just like that beautiful chunk of light, they hovered in front of God Lord so he could study them. "Tell Carefree to take the Bloodthirsty's remains from the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple. We will pay a star area for each piece. It's the deposit, so they will be on our side to fight." The God Lord watched the remains of his archenemy, pondering and then talking to Heavenly King Light. Heavenly King Light regarded him. "Give me more meat pellets. I want to recover faster," hissed the God Lord. Feng Zhu and Spark nodded continuously. Chapter 1275. Fantasy Zone. Chapter 1275. Fantasy Zone _ 7 Rhombus transport warships were heading to 1000 Fantasy Star area at a fast speed, flying directly to the Fantasy Star. They were the transport ships of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce with their private symbol. The 7 battleships carried many individuals part of the staff of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce with the leader at first sky of incipient God realm. Tsunami Chamber of Commerce was the biggest trading corporation in this vast sea of stars. They had branches in many star areas, and they transported materials to big forces everywhere. 1000 Fantasy Sect and Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had a long-term partnership. Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's transport battleships often visited 1000 Fantasy Sect to deliver rare cultivating materials. These 7 battleships were flying towards Fantasy Star. The commander of those ships was the only one at incipient God realm. He was called Banyu, and he cultivated firepower. He was also a notorious, experienced blacksmith. Banyu was in charge of transporting cultivating materials to Fantasy Star this time. He guarded the most important ship, which carried 3 original incipient grade materials and dozens of divine grade herbs that the 1000 Fantasy Sect had ordered. He didn't worry that something unexpected would happen in this trip. One reason was because of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's fame in this universe. The other reason was because they were in the territory of 1000 Fantasy Star area now. It was the territory of 1000 Fantasy Sect. As they were transporting materials that 1000 Fantasy Sect had ordered, he didn't need to worry about unexpected events. Banyu watched the area ahead, frowning and contemplating. The area in front of them was the important area outside Fantasy Star, which was called Fantasy Zone, or the Starsea Mirage. It was a strange zone that created optical illusions of everything that got into the area, and all of them were so real that people couldn't differentiate between them. The headquarters of the 1000 Fantasy Sect was right there. As it was famous, the Fantasy Star had spectacular features. Because the Fantasy Star could create countless illusions in every area of the Fantasy Zone. Without 1000 Fantasy Sect's permission, the battleships of other forces could never find the real Fantasy Star. In Legends, a strong enemy used to attack the 1000 Fantasy Sect. The opponent force had directly stormed into the Fantasy Zone, but hundreds of their battleships couldn't navigate their locations or locate the Fantasy Star. Also, they were hypnotized by their own battleship illusions, so they turned to attack each other as if they were possessed. Eventually, they were all killed in the Fantasy Zone. The Fantasy Star and the Fantasy Zone became famous after that event. Seeing that the Fantasy Zone was getting nearer ahead, Banyu put up his guard and unconsciously checked a closed cabin behind him. Suddenly, the door of that room sprang open. A stern, young man walked out. Seeing the peripheral area of the Fantasy Zone, his eyes sparkled with faint starlight. Banyu frowned and looked at the young man, his face grave and heavy. Usually, the 1000 Fantasy Sect wouldn't allow the strangers come to the Fantasy Star. According to the contract between Tsunami Chamber of Commerce and the 1000 Fantasy Sect, they weren't allowed to bring unidentified people to the area around the Fantasy Star. They couldn't come to the Fantasy Star directly. They had to stop by the area and wait for the warriors of the 1000 Fantasy Sect to come and take the materials. It was to protect the mysteries of Fantasy Star, and it was also the contract that had been effective for so many years between the 1000 Fantasy Sect and Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. However, Tsunami Chamber of Commerce this time had unilaterally violated the contract. Banyu found it very obscure. The manager of Cold Iron City of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had asked Banyu to take that young man with him on this trip. The manager of Cold Iron City had a close relationship with the 1000 Fantasy Sect, and he was Banyu's superior. Thus, even though Banyu knew it was against their principles, he had to agree with the other. That young man had embarked in the middle of the way. Banyu thought he was so mysterious because he didn't know his realm or identity. He guessed that the young man wanted to go to the Fantasy Star, so he took a ride on their battleship because he was afraid that the 1000 Fantasy Sect would spot him before he could reach the place. He didn't know the relationship between that young man and the manager of Cold Iron City, neither the reason why he wanted to go to the Fantasy Star. Anyway, he had to be cautious as he was afraid that it would bring trouble to Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. Thus, along the way, Banyu had always paid attention to that young man and tried to pry on his purpose. "Hey buddy, You want to go to the Fantasy Star, right? Banyu pondered and then smiled at Shi Yin, pointing at the area ahead of them. Look, it's the Fantasy Zone. Once we enter that area, we will see so many illusions of our battleships. It's awesome. You can see it soon. It's really interesting. Yeah, I want to visit the Fantasy Star, replied the young man faintly. That young man was Shi Yin. He had talked to Ming Hao, Xin He, and Frederick in the Blood Sea, the Holy Land of the Bloodthirsty Force. Although he hadn't earned respect from the three great chiefs, he had got that glorious master's throne. He understood clearly that his current realm wasn't enough to convince the three experts at the second and third sky of a mortal realm. He needed to prove himself. He needed to increase his realm and accumulate more powers. When he could be stronger and surpass Ming Hao's group, he could gain their support. Ming Hao, Xin He, and Frederick had arranged for Shi Yin to go to the Fantasy Star of the Thousand Fantasy Sect to find Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine to discuss the alliance. Also, he should ask to take back the Bloodthirsty's remains. According to Ming Hao's information, Caesar and Lorraine were in the Fantasy Star, which hid deep inside the Fantasy Zone. Although the Thousand Fantasy Sect had the teleport formations, they had only used them for their members only. Thus, he couldn't use the teleport formation to get to the Fantasy Star. Ming Hao had contacted the Tsunami Chamber of Commerce to let Shi Yin take a ride on their transport battleship to the Fantasy Star. He would meet Ling Xiang there. Shi Yin didn't have any objection to this. Our business trips can only anchor by the Fantasy Star. We're not allowed to enter the planet. At that time, the Thousand Fantasy Sect staff will come to take the materials. I can't send you to the Fantasy Star directly, Banyu shrugged begrudgingly, indicating that it was all he could do. Shi Yin grinned, but his eyes were serious. It's okay. I can get inside anyway. He'd cultivated space power Upanishad. If he couldn't get into the planet when he was at its peripheral area, did that mean that he cultivates space power Upanishad in vain? Actually, if he left now, he could still get to the Fantasy Star, but he would encounter some trouble, though. The Fantasy Zone had layers of illusions to the ordinary warriors. The mirage type of illusions was troublesome. If they couldn't find the real object, their mind and energy would be drained until death. However, to Shi Yin, the Fantasy Zone wasn't a real problem as he thought that it was just an area with layers of spaces placed upon each other. However, because of the different spaces being placed in the same area, illusions appeared. As he could decode the mysteries of space, it was easy for him to distinguish the illusions and the real objects. He didn't want to get into the place directly. He wanted to stay on the battleship of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce because he wanted to take this opportunity to observe the marvel of the Fantasy Zone. He could study the mysteries of the layers of spaces that would benefit his space power Upanishad. Buddy, are you confident? Banyu was frightened, his eyes surprised. He became more cautious. Shi Yin looked at the Fantasy Zone, which was getting closer to them, and answered nothing. His soul altar began to spin. His magical soul consciousness flew out and moved around the Fantasy Zone to observe the features of the layered space. Banyu snorted when Shi Yin didn't answer him. He wasn't trying to be polite anymore, and he said in a cold voice, "Then I wish you a safe and smooth journey." Shortly after, the 7 battleships entered the Fantasy Zone. As soon as they entered the Fantasy Zone, the 7 ships started to change. Countless identical ships appeared around the 7 ships of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. Each group had 7 ships, just like the formation that Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had, and moved in different directions. A few warriors who had come to the Fantasy Zone for the first time were screaming in awe. They appraised the marvelous scene that they were witnessing. They saw many warriors on the illusional ships who were observing the marvel and cheering like them. Those warriors looked exactly like them with the same soul energy fluctuation. It was like they were watching themselves in a mirror. However, their reflections in the mirror seemed to have their own lives. It was a wonderful experience indeed. Banyu was surprised. He couldn't help but look at Shi Yin, waiting to see if he would become excited and behold the scene or not. Unfortunately, he didn't see any gleam of surprise on Shi Yin's face. He found that Shi Yin was so calm as if he had seen the same things countless times and was numb now. He didn't know that Shi Yin was using his special soul consciousness, which was like an electrical spear, to sense in different spaces of the fantasy zone. His soul altar was spinning fast and releasing space energy. The layered space seemed to shrink and be projected in his head. It had become a bright mirror that spun in his head and reflected a lot of images that were so real to him. The persons in the mirror were moving in different dimensions like they were actually living and bringing Yin the new conception. He closed his eyes. The pure flows of soul consciousness flew out of his soul altar and reached different spaces to visit each illusion that Yin had in his brain. When his soul consciousness entered those illusions, he suddenly had a feeling that those illusions revived and turned into one of his clones that connected to him mentally. It felt like they were him. Those illusions in the layered space had turned into Yin himself when his soul consciousness reached them. Yin had become dozens of people living in different dimensions with different thoughts. He observed them and became skeptical to see who was real and who was just an illusion. Real or unreal, nothing is eternal. As long as your realm is profound, you can change real to unreal and vice versa. A clone can be real too. He got a shock as he opened his eyes to watch dozens of his illusions around him. He got some streak of enjoying the marvel on his face. Banyu still paid attention to him. At this moment, he changed his visage as he couldn't believe in his eyes. He found that when Yin opened his eyes, Yin's illusions began to look different from him. Dozens of Yin had different expressions. Some were smiling, dancing, or even closing his eyes. They had different activities and expressions. Yin's illusions seemed to have lives that they had turned from illusions to the real persons. Dozens of illusions revived and became the real Yin. Although they had different activities and facial expressions, they had the same aura and soul energy fluctuations. Banyu was bewildered, his face skeptical as he didn't know what was going on there. He had come to the fantasy zone many times, but he had never seen anything like this. He was suddenly insecure. Looking at Yin, a fear rose in his heart and the hair on his nape rose. Chapter 1276. Open the Space. Chapter 1276. Open the Space _ Yin didn't know that Banyu was restless as he was wholeheartedly sinking in his marvelous comprehension. He seemed to not know the commotions around him. He knew a new ability of space power Upanishad that even Bello at second sky of incipient God realm didn't know. This kind of layering up spaces used spaces as different facets of a mirror to create many illusions. It was an incredible use of space energy. Yin's real body closed his eyes and his soul altar spun. Many Yin inside the layers of space had different activities and facial expressions. One was laughing, one was shaking his legs contentedly, and another was lowering his head to consider something. They were like his clones with his consciousness and streaks of life. They were the real existences. Oh wow. Freaky. What's going on? Finally, the other warriors had found strange things. They couldn't help but scream and look at the battleship in the middle of the formation and Yin who was closing his eyes. Inside different spaces around them, they saw many Yins with different activities and expressions. Apparently, Yin wasn't different from his illusions. They were bewildered and scared, the hair on their nape rising. Shut up, all of you. Banyu snorted. The others had their eyes changed. They quieted down but still looked at Yin curiously. In their eyes, Yin was so mysterious and peculiar. It seemed like he could move through different spaces as he pleased. After a while, the strange change happened again. Dozens Yin scattering in different spaces looked like they were summoned. They flew from his left and right. Even though some were smiling or contemplating, they were all heading to Yin's real body. Those people had weaved through the spaces and congregated from different dimensions. Banyu discolored in fright. More warriors gawked as they didn't know what was going on. Different Yins with their own consciousness came from different dimensions and disappeared into Yin's real body. They were the wisps of soul consciousness that he had sent away that now returned to him. After those Yins disappeared, the other warriors found no illusions of Yin in this fantasy zone where countless illusions could be produced. They could still see the lines of battleships on their left and right moving in a diamond-shaped formation. Also, they still saw the warriors with the same aghast expression as them on those battleships. Now, those illusions were looking in the same direction. However, the illusion that should be there didn't exist. Yin didn't exist in this fantasy area. It was like they were standing in an area that had many big mirrors. They could see their reflections in those mirrors, but Yin, the one who was standing next to them, didn't appear in any mirror. It was so strange indeed. Oh, it's so. Yin opened his eyes, the light of understanding sparkling in his pupils. Pop! A fantasy sky ring on his left hand exploded. Many weapons and divine crystals inside that ring quivered then overflowed, disappearing into his glabella. Yin opened a space inside the brilliant incipient extent in his soul altar to gather the materials that used to be stored in his fantasy sky ring. As he had understood the mystery of the layered space, he cleaned a space in his incipient extent to store his stuff. Later on, his incipient extent became his fantasy sky ring. It could store many items. As his thoughts flickered, a divine crystal emerged in his hand. His thoughts changed and the divine crystal he had just taken out of the incipient extent got back to its place in his incipient extent. He chuckled. With the new understanding of spatial ability, he was able to open his incipient extent, the fantasy world, and connect it to the real world. He created a fantasy sky ring that could store billions of items. Closing his eyes to feel for a while, he nodded to Banyu. He wasn't really curious about the fantasy zone anymore. He returned to the cabin that Banyu had given him. He stayed there and sensed his new ability. He had a strong feeling that he was about to break to second sky of incipient god realm. He needed time to comprehend it. Inside the fantasy zone, the battleships of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce were still heading in a direction. Banyu had come here many times, so he was familiar with the fantasy zone. However, he still needed to keep contacting the Thousand Fantasy sect to get instructions from them. They had to change their directions continuously. There's someone 1 hour behind you. They're going to the Fantasy Star too. Please give them a ride. They're from the Broken Hall. Our Thousand Fantasy sect has invited them here. They got some problems, so their battleships were broken. It's not easy for them to travel through the fantasy zone. Please help them. Today, as Banyu was talking to a member of the Thousand Fantasy sect through the Soundstone, he was given new instructions about the direction then suddenly requested something. Banyu didn't think it was strange, so he agreed. He said that he would pick the others up on the way. He had come to the Fantasy Star many times, and he had encountered this situation before. Some warriors might have gotten lost and done something stupid like fighting their own illusions and breaking their battleships if they came here for the first time without a navigator. Sometimes, the Thousand Fantasy sect asked them to pick up some warriors related to the Fantasy Star and give them a ride to the star. Thus, the Thousand Fantasy sect didn't need to send someone from the Fantasy Star to pick up the others. Pay attention. After 1 hour, we will pick up some people on our way, said Banyu. The warriors on the other battleships nodded to him, but they were still keeping an eye on Banyu's battleship and on Yan's closed cabin to be exact. They were so curious, though. As Yin had joined them unknowingly, they were curious already. It was because Banyu was famous for his stubbornness and for strictly keeping the rules. Bringing people the Fantasy Star hadn't approved was an act of violating the contract. In the past several years, Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had a lot of good opportunities, but Banyu had denied them because he wasn't a flexible businessman. However, it confused them a lot when Banyu had brought someone unidentified who was against their agreement with the Thousand Fantasy sect. 1 hour later, in the layers of illusions in front of them, there were 3 warriors who the fantasy zone was creating many illusions of their images like in the mirrors. There were 2 elderly warriors and a girl with her face veiled waiting for them. The warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had their eyes brighten when they saw the girl in the distance. Although she wore a veil, she could still surprise them. The girl wore a pure white dress with the hem inlaid with the accessories of the twinkling stars and moons. However, her slim, white wrists were tied by a dark, bluish chain that had electrical beams winding around. From time to time, people could hear thunder from her. Apparently, the Broken Hall had confined this girl. However, her clear eyes were like a bright moon above the white veil that could still charm people. The two old men of the broken hall had first and second sky of incipient god realm. They watched her carefully, their faces stern. After they recognized that Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's battleships were coming, they turned away to see. Hey, the real versions of us are here. The first sky of incipient god realm screamed and waved his hands. However, at the same time, the surrounding illusions screamed the same way and waved. His illusions had made the same actions. He made it more difficult for the others to distinguish between the real warriors and the illusions. Banyu frowned and looked at the three people ahead of them. A deep cyan light sparkled in his eyes. A special crystal in his hand released magical energy fluctuations. That crystal was from the Thousand Fantasy sect, and it was given to Tsunami Chamber of Commerce so they could navigate and find the real objects among the illusions in the fantasy zone. Banyu held the crystal to sense. Then he pointed to a group of people. Over there, their ships moved to that area. 3 minutes later, the ships stopped by the other three. Banyu wore a serious visage and called, "As per request of the Thousand Fantasy sect, we're giving you a ride to the Fantasy Star. Please embark quickly." The two old men of the broken hall exchanged looks and then nodded. They brought the girl and flew to Banyu's ship. Banyu frowned and threw a quick glance at Shi Yan's closed cabin. Banyu said hastily, "You guys should get on the first ship. My ship carries a lot of precious materials for the Thousand Fantasy sect. I'm afraid that we don't have enough rooms for you guys." "Well, someone is there. Why did you tell us that you didn't have more room? Don't deceive us." The first sky of incipient god realm expert snorted. He didn't care about Banyu's objection and stormed towards them, landing by Banyu. He looked at Shi Yan's cabin and frowned. "There are 2 empty rooms there. We just need one. We don't need you guys to take care of us a lot." Then, the two old men of the broken hall brought the girl in the white dress to one of the empty cabins. "I need a quiet environment." Suddenly, a stiff and cold voice came from the adjacent occupied room. The two old men of the broken hall became stern. They looked at Banyu. The man at second sky of incipient god realm laughed evilly. "Well, that one isn't from your Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, right? Our broken hall, Thousand Fantasy sect, and the Heaven River Temple do business with your Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. I know the agreement between you guys and the Thousand Fantasy sect. You're not allowed to bring strangers to the Fantasy Star. You're violating the agreement, aren't you?" As soon as he arrived, he found someone learning the Upanishad in Banyu's cabin. As he knew many secret rules of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, he immediately understood that Shi Yan wasn't part of the staff of Chamber of Commerce. That's why he came to make it clear. Hearing him, Banyu grimaced and shouted, "It's our Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's business. You don't need to mind even though you're from the Broken Hall." The two elders of the Broken Hall frowned when they encountered stubborn Banyu. They could smell trouble here. They knew how mysterious and intimidating Tsunami Chamber of Commerce was. Even the God Clan had to step away from this Chamber of Commerce. Of course, the Broken Hall wouldn't dare to turn its back against Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. They wanted to trouble Banyu, but since they knew he was tough, they couldn't trouble him anymore. They didn't notice that the clear eyes of the girl in their confinement had sparkled with a strange light when she heard his voice. "Air?" At the same time, Shi Yan also made a surprise sound as he seemed to find something strange. Then, the closed cabin's door sprang open. Chapter 1277. You are not qualified. Chapter 1277. You are not qualified, _ Shi Yan stood on the stone bed of the cold chamber. He squinted to have a better focus at the girl that the two incipient God Realm experts of the Broken Hall were confining. She wore a veil and she couldn't move. However, the light emitting from her bright moon eyes was really touching. Banyu stood aside and said darkly, "Friends from the Broken Hall, outsiders aren't allowed to interfere with our Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's business. Without permission from the manager of Cold Iron City, you can't stay on this ship. Please leave." In this vast galaxy, Tsunami Chamber of Commerce was powerful and wealthy. Even the God Clan had to give them face. Although the Broken Hall was also intimidating, they were dependent on Tsunami Chamber of Commerce in some aspects. The warriors of the Broken Hall frowned when they heard Banyu. They became hesitant. He isn't from your Chamber of Commerce. How can he embark this ship? Tsunami Chamber of Commerce has done something against the agreement. Aren't you afraid that the Thousand Fantasy sect will question you? The first Sky of Incipient God Realm expert shouted. However, he was just trying to sound bold. It's our Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's business. You guys from the Broken Hall don't need to interfere. I made myself clear enough. Without the permission of our Cold Iron City's manager, other people can't embark this ship. If he's here, he sure got the permission from our manager. You guys didn't, so you should leave. Ban Yu's face was stern. He lifted his head to look at the other battleships. Some war chariots suddenly flew out carrying dozens of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's warriors who didn't look friendly at all. The two old men of the Broken Hall were called Wei Yun and Xing Shang. Wei Yun was at First Sky of Incipient God Realm and Xing Shang was at Second Sky of Incipient God Realm. Xing Shang was Xing Ming's cousin, who was famous for his sinister deeds in the Broken Hall. Also, he was loyal and dedicated to Xing Ming. The Broken Hall consisted of different halls. Xing Ming was the loyal subordinate of Caesar's father in the past. He was in charge of those scattered halls. He chained them and consolidated them into one force. When Caesar's father had power, Xing Ming didn't have many benefits. Caesar's father had the power to decide many things. However, when Caesar began to be the hall master, he always cultivated alone. He didn't care too much about the matters of the Broken Hall, which made Xing Ming have the chance to manage all the works of the subordinate halls. Xing Ming's power became too influential. He had become the one with real power in the Broken Hall. The masters of the subordinating halls had only reported to Xing Ming. Xing Ming had made good advantage of his power to enrich his family. He had spent many precious cultivating materials of the Broken Hall on nurturing the experts of the Xing family. Eventually, the Xing family had become an intimidating family of the Broken Hall and could even replace the role of Caesar's family. Xing Shang was Xing Ming's cousin, a member of the Xing family. He only listened to Xing Ming while swaggering in the Broken Hall. Xing Shang knew that the Broken Hall wasn't weak, but they couldn't offend Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. Thus, although Ban Yu was bold, he had pulled himself together. He decided to yield and retreat the brutal makings he had formed after so many years. His team was going to leave this ship. Xing Shang glared at Wei Yun next to him, cursing him for the bad idea under his breath that embarrassed him. He snorted, "We should go. Just embark another ship." He signaled Wei Yun to bring the girl and leave. Swoosh! The veil covering the girl's face was torn strangely, pieces of it falling like leaves. An extremely exquisite face was revealed. Her white skin was like beautiful jade with the moonlight. She looked so pure that people were absorbed with her looks. The warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, riding the war chariots, had prepared well. When they saw the girl's glamour after the veil was gone, they felt enchanted. They eyed her, deeply showing the face when a normal man saw an extremely beautiful woman. "It's you indeed," Shi Yin sounded surprised. That girl was Ouyang Shuang, the moon god of the Three God sect who cultivated moonlight. She used to seal herself inside a meteorite in Sky Meteor City. At that time, her realm was already profound. As soon as she got on the ship, Shi Yin got a familiar feeling. It was because Ouyang Shuang cultivated moonlight power, which wasn't different from Shi Yan's star power Upanishad. It was the magical cultivating technique that the God Clan had spread out dozens of thousands of years ago. Now, Ouyang Shuang was at First Sky of Incipient God Realm. She gave people a pure, holy feeling. Apparently, her realm was more marvelous and profound. Shi Yin was very surprised. His cultivating progress was rapid because of his devouring power Upanishad. As Ouyang Shuang had cultivated only one power, it was astonishing that she could progress that quickly. Shi Yin knew that Ouyang Shuang should have some good encounters. Otherwise, at a normal warrior's cultivating speed, she wouldn't be able to reach First Sky of Incipient God Realm in a short time like this. "What do you want?" As Wei Yun saw that Ouyang Shuang's veil was torn, he had a concealed obscene gleam flash in his pupils. He snorted and rolled his eyes at Shi Yin. "Kid, you shouldn't poke your nose in the Broken Hall's business." If Shi Yin wasn't on this ship that hinted his high position and echelon, Wei Yun would have attacked him immediately. "Friends, I just received the request to give you a ride. I'm not responsible for your safety. Banyu frowned and reminded the others. Xing Shang wore a dark face, coldly looking at Shi Yin and then at Banyu. The vicious light sparkled in his eyes, but he hadn't said anything yet. Shi Yin didn't react to their words. He just looked at Ouying Lu Shuang and the chains on her wrists. Shi Yin and this woman didn't have a close friendship or anything like that. However, his star power Upanishad came from Ouying Lu Shuang's precursor. From this point on, he owed the Ouying family a favor. Moreover, Ouying Lu Shuang was from Grace Mainland. After he had fused with Grace Mainland's origin, he had unconsciously considered the creatures from Grace Mainland as his family members. Seeing Ouying Lu Shuang get confined, he considered the possibility of saving her. Ouying Lu Shuang's eyes were clear and tranquil. She just looked at him and had no intention of begging. However, Shi Yin felt a little embarrassed under her gaze. He gave a slight cough and said, "She's my friend. Leave her to me. I'll explain to Caesar." His words sounded natural. Although Caesar was the hall master of the Broken Hall, a famous character in this universe, Shi Yin's position now was higher than his. Although their realms were different, as he was the Bloodthirsty Force's master, it was enough to make up for the gap. He thought that it was natural, but the others didn't think so. Wei Yun and Xing Shang, the two experts of the Broken Hall, heard him and their face became cold and harsh. Caesar was the hall master of the Broken Hall. Although he didn't involve himself in the matters of the organization, he was their pillar. He was respected more than his father that year. Even Xing Shang, the haughty member of the Broken Hall, due to his powerful cousin, still had great respect for Caesar. It was because Caesar was at the immortal realm. In this vast sea of stars, there weren't many immortal realm experts. Thus, Caesar was the foundation and the pride of the Broken Hall. But in this place, an unknown young man had called their master by his real name without respect. He didn't put Caesar in his eyes. It made Wei Yun and Xing Shang feel insulted. It was an insult to the entire Broken Hall. Banyu of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce also had an awkward countenance. He had a gleam of irony in his eyes that he didn't want to conceal. Caesar, the hall master of the Broken Hall, was famous for his passion for practicing martial arts. His fame was well known around the universe. At the immortal realm, this powerful character didn't meet up with other people regularly. This unknown young man had said nonsense. Apparently, he didn't think that Caesar was a respectful senior. He didn't know the immensity of earth and heaven. Banyu had a conclusion for his assessment of Shi Yin. The name of our Broken Hall's master is something you can take in vain. If you are the president of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, the sect master of the Thousand Fantasy Sect, or the master of the Heaven River Temple, you can say his name. You're just a stinky kid. Do you think you're qualified to say his name? You know nothing. Well, then don't blame me for giving you a lesson on behalf of your seniors. Wei Yun snorted. He wanted to attack Shi Yin directly. Xing Shang sneered. Don't kill him. Just break his limbs. It's not good to overreact. Don't fight on my ships. Banyu couldn't help but shout when he saw the situation accelerate. Take him out. Xing Shang was still wary of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. He nodded to Wei Yun and signaled him to give face to Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. They shouldn't create any unnecessary dispute. The warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce around were frightened. Their line of sight shifted from the two experts of the Broken Hall to Shi Yin and then to Banyu. They were waiting for Banyu's instructions. Banyu didn't change his countenance. He tacitly allowed the Broken Hall to teach Shi Yin a lesson. It was because Banyu thought that Shi Yin shouldn't interfere with others' business and tear the veil on the girl's face. Also, he shouldn't offend Caesar. Banyu thought that it could be a good lesson, so Shi Yin could know how cruel this life was. He had considered Shi Yin a junior who had just come to experience life. He didn't know the dangers hidden in this sea of stars where there were some forces he shouldn't offend. Teach me. Shi Yin grinned, his eyes cold and dark. He turned his head to look at the illusions of Wei Yun and Xing Shang in the layered space. His soul altar spun and waves of energy rippled through his body, expanding in just a blink of an eye. When that happened, Wei Yun's and Xing Shang's reflections in those layers of space seemed to receive a new vitality. They became lively, wiggled out of their spaces, and stormed toward the real Wei Yun and Xing Shang. All of a sudden, the strange illusions in the mirrors had become demons that attempted to kill the true bodies. Wei Yun and Xing Shang were petrified. They screamed in fear, their minds shaken. Since the two of them had stayed in this fantasy zone for a long time, they knew how bizarre it was. They also knew that the Thousand Fantasy sect could use illusions to attack the enemies. Seeing their own illusions dashing towards them, they instinctively thought that the Thousand Fantasy sect's member was attacking them. While they were still panicked, Shi Yin squinted and the 5 starlight chains shot out of his eyes. They wound around Ouying Lu Shuang quickly and directly pulled her into the cabin. Shi Yin then walked out of his cabin and sneered, "Teach me? Well, let alone you too. Even Caesar isn't qualified to do that." You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.